Bleeding heavily on the ground, the man screams that he will kill his opponent. Surrounded by a sea of the undead, he repeats his vow of vengeance. At that moment, the red-haired warrior lies defeated as the villain approaches. With a wicked smirk on his face, his opponent merely gives a mocking laugh. He then wonders how the hero is still breathing after everything. With his face filled with rage, the sword saint Chronogaius grinds his teeth. His enemy calls him pathetic because he cannot even gather mana. He tells the protagonist to stop fighting, claiming his own mana level is far superior. Even so, Chrono keeps pushing himself to his limit, blood dripping from his mouth. The warrior says he doesn't care about any of that as he struggles to stand. He offers the villain the world and his fame, no longer caring about such things. But before he can say more, zombies begin to emerge from all around. Among them is a blonde woman who seems to have been turned into a zombie. The young woman crawls across the ground, a look of intense pain on her face. Her eyes glow red and she growls, seemingly having lost all consciousness. Seeing this, Chrono flies into a rage and demands to know what was done to his wife, Hannah. At that moment, the warrior recalls a happy memory with his beloved in the past. In the memory, he was saying goodbye to her, looking highly determined to complete his mission. His wife then smiles, affectionately wishing him a safe journey. The hero promises to take care of himself and turns to embark on his journey. Back in the present, the horrific sight of his wife crawling continues. This sight drives the protagonist into complete agony and despair. The villain then explains that he used his mana to turn the woman into a zombie. Hearing this, the warrior's eyes fill with hatred and shock. The enemy asks if Chrono knows why he lost the battle and his wife. The sword saint is left speechless, his face contorted in pure rage. Then the white-haired man says he will tell him, instructing him to look around. He explains that in this world mana is everything and those with more power rule. The protagonist remains silent, sweating and grinding his teeth in frustration. He remembers his comrades calling him captain, their voices full of hope. One of his men had said with conviction that if they won this battle, world peace would be achieved, but now they are nothing more than the undead. Back in reality, Chrono curses the villain, thinking of everyone he has lost. The antagonist then reveals that there are two things in this world he absolutely adores. The first is a person with absolute power like Chrono himself. With a sadistic look, he says there is a second thing he enjoys very much. And that is the exact moment when the spirit of the strong is broken. Suddenly chains of purple energy bind the hero, who screams in pain and agony. His eyes reflect pure despair as he struggles to make a sound. The enemy declares that he has sealed the warrior's mana for all eternity. With this, both his power and his title of Sword Saint will end right there along with his life, and he forces the hero to watch it all unfold. He then grabs Hannah's head and tells Chrono to witness his own helplessness. The villain conjures a sword of energy, and Chrono calls him a bastard in pure hatred. Just as the blade is about to strike the young woman, the warrior screams for him to stop. His eyes are wide with fury and absolute despair at that moment. The enemy taunts him, asking why he isn't saving his beloved wife, and challenges him to show his highly acclaimed sword saint power right then and there. With a mock "if you can," he finishes the woman off in front of her husband. The protagonist watches in horror as the sword pierces through his beloved. Faced with that horrific scene, the only thing the warrior can do is stand in stunned silence. Seeing his wife struck down, he tries to speak, but the words refuse to leave his mouth. With his hands on the ground and filled with hatred, the hero screams that he no longer cares about mana. He then stands up, his body radiating a red aura, and vows to kill the villain. Chrono tells his enemy to keep laughing with that ugly face of his while he still can. In a fit of rage, he swears that one day he will rip out his throat and tear off his arms. The Sword Saint screams that he will obliterate the bastard until nothing is left of him. The villain simply watches him with a mocking smile on his face, completely unfazed. With a casual "as you wish," he attacks the protagonist with a blade of purple energy. The blow hits Chrono dead on, leaving him paralyzed with pain and shock. At that moment, the image of the enraged hero is reflected in his opponent's eyes. Immediately after, the white-haired man steps on the fallen warrior's chest. With wide eyes, the hero sees his former comrade Snow Zombis approaching. Fallen and helpless, he is quickly surrounded by the undead. His enemy then says that weakness is a sin and that he doesn't deserve to live. Grabbing his chin, he asserts that the protagonist no longer has the right to speak. At that, his zombie-turned wife lunges toward her defenseless husband. In an instant, Chrono is attacked by his beloved and his former comrades. The undead begin to devour him as he screams in agony and despair. His eyes become bloodshot as his life slowly begins to slip away. At that moment, the zombified Hannah can be seen crying black tears of pain. The villain watches the entire scene with a cold, completely emotionless gaze. He introduces himself as Gilgrenau Proud and tells the hero to utter his name in the underworld. With his final breath, the protagonist repeats over and over that he will kill him. But suddenly everything goes dark, and a mysterious blue light emerges from nothingness. Floating in this void, the warrior wonders what is happening and spots a shadow. The mysterious figure lands in front of him, proving it is not just an illusion. The hero stares at the entity, which comments on him screaming for vengeance until the very end. A giant, shadowy creature appears, saying it relishes his miserable state. Startled, the red-haired man asks what that thing in front of him is. The hooded entity merely stares at him with glowing yellow eyes. He wonders if it is a monster or a demon as the creature laughs. The figure notes that he cultivated his mana to the 7th level and became the Sword Saint. Yet even so, he was easily defeated by Gilgren and asks if that frustrates him. The creature then asks if he wants vengeance and offers him an opportunity to achieve it. With a macabre smile, the entity says it will grant him temporary life and power. The warrior is confused by the offer of life and power and questions the being. The creature explains that he will have a new body for 3 minutes to kill Gilgren. The protagonist asks how it knows about his enemy and what it wants in return. The entity speaks of the small light he once had and how it was trampled. The being then tells him he has no choice but to kill the necromancer for his beloved soul. Hearing this, Chrono is shocked, sweat pouring down his face. Suddenly, a boy with pink hair and red eyes wakes up in a panic. He is standing in a desolate place, surrounded by numerous corpses on the ground. Sitting up, the young man realizes that this is the very spot where he had previously died. Looking at his hand, he wonders if he has somehow come back to life. Suddenly, the boy realizes he is in the body of a child and begins to panic. The memory of the shadowy creature offering him an opportunity rushes back to his mind. Realizing the situation, the young man curses that bastard in his thoughts. He stares at his small hands, trying to make sense of what just happened. Looking at his hand, he realizes he still cannot channel his mana. He then wonders what kind of opportunity he was actually given. After all, this chance at revenge was supposed to be without the use of his powers. At that moment, 2 men appear, and one of them points at the boy on the ground. The soldiers approach, and one of them comments that he is just a brat all alone. But the other replies that it doesn't matter, as they must eliminate all survivors. With a wicked smirk, he states that those are the orders of Lord Gilgren. Upon hearing his enemy's name, pure hatred washes over the young man's face. The soldier then lunges forward with his sword to finish the boy off mercilessly. However, with a swift movement, the boy manages to dodge the fatal blow. He slides across the ground, seizing the chance to grab a sword discarded nearby. Even so, he realizes that his current body is extremely weak and slow. The soldier praises his movements but remarks that it won't be enough. Holding the sword with difficulty, the young man grinds his teeth in frustration. He realizes he is lacking not only mana but his physical strength as well. His opponent says that even with good reflexes, he can do nothing without power. With a sadistic gaze, he echoes the villain's words, saying that weakness is a sin. Those words trigger the boy's memories of all the tragedies that occurred. The deaths of his friends, his wife, and Gilgren's speech about the weak. With his face consumed by hatred, the youth grinds his teeth tightly. In his thoughts, he asserts that he doesn't care about mana at all. Clenching his fist, he resolves to get his revenge no matter the cost. Seeing the aura beginning to emanate from the boy, the soldier becomes highly confused. Suddenly, a massive explosion of golden energy erupts, taking everyone by surprise. The young man is astonished by the power surging from his own body. Chains of golden energy begin to form around his arms. His eyes widen in shock as he witnesses the seal on his mana shattering. The chains binding his power begin to shatter one by one. The soldiers are startled by the smoke, wondering what just happened. Amidst the golden flames, the boy stands up with a sword in hand. He is shocked to realize he can use mana and that the power is incredible. The men wonder how a mere brat could suddenly possess so much mana. But one of them ignores the danger and charges, screaming that he will finish the boy. The soldier leaps toward the youth, intending to end it quickly. With a focused gaze, the protagonist readies himself for the enemy's attack. He dodges with ease, preparing a swift and powerful counterattack. With a single motion, the young man cuts down several soldiers at once. After the attack, he lands on a rock and glares at the remaining enemies. He blocks another soldier's strike with his sword without much effort. With a confident smile on his face, the boy seems to be enjoying himself. He thinks that none of this makes sense, but he doesn't care. The protagonist now has only one goal in mind and nothing else matters. With this power, he vows to himself that he will kill that bastard. He recalls the shadowy creature granting him this chance at revenge. One of the men screams and charges full force at the young warrior. But with a single strike, the boy decapitates all the enemies. The soldiers are shocked to see their comrades falling one by one. One of the survivors curses the youth, wondering what kind of person he is. Another soldier shouts at his men to hurry up and kill him already. The remaining enemies charge together to attack the boy all at once. The remaining soldiers band together for a final assault on the boy in their midst. But the youth dodges the attacks with breathtaking, lethal speed. With a swift movement, he slashes the throat of one of the enemies without hesitation. He then unleashes his power to strike down the last remaining soldier. With a strike of golden energy, he finishes off the man, who collapses lifelessly to the ground. The boy stares up at the sky, contemplating what he has just achieved with all that power. He wonders how such a scrawny body can possess so much strength and endurance. He looks down at his hand and notices the power is still flowing through him. The protagonist realizes that this power is not his own, but rather belongs to the original boy. He then thinks that perhaps he doesn't need mana if he has this boy's power. He recognizes his own fighting style but notes that his mana was never this strong. Gazing at his reflection in the sword, he contemplates this strange situation. The creature explains that while the new body broke the seal, the power only lasts for 3 minutes. The boy understands that the restriction is just 3 minutes per day to use this power. At that moment, the image of Gilgren and his malevolent energy flashes back into his mind. The memory of his enemy finishing off his wife fills him with rage and grief. With his face twisted in hatred, he declares that nothing else matters because Gilgren is his sole target. Surveying the destruction of the city, he believes his enemy cannot be far. The youth then promises that he will find him no matter what. Suddenly, the boy is startled by a strange sensation in his body. The sword slips from his hand, and he begins to feel an excruciating pain. Clutching his chest, the young man wonders what this unbearable pain is. He looks at his hand, breaking out in a cold sweat, unable to comprehend what is happening. The pain is so intense that tears begin to stream from his eyes. The boy realizes his mana is fading and begins to panic. Weak and powerless, he curses his predicament as he starts to pass out. He struggles to remain conscious, but the exhaustion is overwhelming. His eyes close and he blacks out completely into the darkness. A voice asks why the boy is still alive and complains about their father. Another voice then asks who those people are and where their father is. The voices decide to dump him in the forest to be eaten by wild beasts. Next, we see someone walking and humming peacefully through the forest. However, the young man wakes up tied up on the ground, unable to move or react. Two blonde boys stare down at him, mocking him for lacking mana but having plenty of luck. One of them smirks and says, "This time you're definitely going to die, Seek." The protagonist realizes that Seek is the name of the body he has reincarnated into. The boys call him a loser and tell him he doesn't belong in their family. He realizes the boy also had a difficult life and was cast aside by his family. One of the youths then dumps a brown substance over the tied-up boy's head. He smiles and tells Seek not to worry because a monster will find him soon. The protagonist then orders the boys to untie him, leaving them utterly confused. One of the brothers sneers and asks if he is begging for his life. With a cold glare, the young man says he will only repeat himself once more. His face filled with rage, he firmly demands that they untie him. The brothers are terrified as they witness a blue energy emanating from the boy's body. One of them screams at his brother Grika to run, but Grika doesn't understand why. Grika asks why his brother is scared, pointing out that Seek has no mana. The other boy stammers, unable to explain, making Grika even more confused. He then says they carry the name Gilgren and shouldn't act so pathetic. Upon hearing his enemy's name, Seek's eyes fill with pure hatred. Terrified, one of the brothers flees in a panic, while the other shouts for him to wait, completely baffled. Seeing his brother's cowardice, Grika clicks his tongue in anger and frustration. Meanwhile, the protagonist's eyes glow red, showing his intense hatred. As he flees, the youth screams at Seek not to get cocky and to die being eaten by monsters. Tied up on the ground, the protagonist watches the two brothers run off deep into the forest. The boy then mutters the names of the two brothers under his breath, Grika and Grio. He recalls them calling him Monolith Seek, which helps him understand the situation better. With a smirk, he thinks to himself that he has a few questions for those two. But first, he needs to free himself from the ropes, and at that exact moment, a giant foot appears. The massive creature stops in front of him, staring down at the tied-up boy. A giant drooling rhinoceros with glowing purple eyes glares at him, ready to strike. The creature's shadow covers him completely, and he gasps as he recognizes a rhino beast. He is shocked by the sheer size of the beast, the ruler of the forest. Without wasting a second, the massive rhino beast charges at the defenseless boy. With his face set in determination, the youth tries to move in any way possible to escape. At the very last second, he manages to break free from the ropes and roll aside to safety. He thinks to himself that a child's body wouldn't survive a single hit from that creature. Kneeling and panting, the youth confirms that at least he managed to get rid of the ropes. The creature attacks again, but the boy evades it by leaping nimbly over it. He tries to channel his powers, only to realize he truly cannot use his mana. He then wonders how on earth he unleashed that absurd mana to defeat the soldiers earlier. The youth lands a punch on the monster's head, but the blow barely scratches it. The impact of the punch is so intense that he injures himself, spitting up blood. The creature shakes its head violently and easily tosses the boy aside. Fallen on the ground, he curses his inability to kill a single monster in this child's body. Yet his eyes burn with determination, despite sweating from pain and sheer exhaustion. At that moment, the memory of his comrades calling him captain rushes back to him. He also remembers his beloved wife's smile before everything went to ruin. And finally, the image of the bastard who caused the entire tragedy resurfaces. Back in the present, the boy's face contorts in sheer rage and hatred. Grinding his teeth, he screams to himself that he doesn't care about anything anymore. He readies himself to fight again, swearing he will kill that bastard. Meanwhile, the scene shifts, revealing a grand, luxurious mansion in another location. Inside, the two brothers are walking down a massive, beautifully decorated hallway. One of the youths asks why their father has not returned home yet. Soon, he spots other men in the hallway and grows curious about their presence. A red-haired man greets them, and the youth asks if something happened. The man replies that the situation is far worse. The squad sent to Ganchable has been wiped out. Upon hearing this, the two brothers are completely shocked by the news. They ask who could have done such a thing, but the man says they have no leads. He confirms that so far they have not found the person responsible for the massacre. The two brothers exchange worried and fearful glances. Grika then remembers that Ganchable was the exact place where they abandoned Seek. This leads him to suspect that perhaps the boy knew something. But his brother retorts that it doesn't matter, even if the kid did know something. Suddenly, the sound of a door swinging open echoes down the hallway, catching everyone's attention. Thinking it is their father, the youths prepare to greet him. One brother grows worried, thinking that if Seek knew something, they shouldn't have abandoned him. Irritated, his brother tells him to shut up, claiming that none of it matters anymore. He opens the door and begins to say that on top of everything, that Brat was only. But before he can finish his sentence, his brother is struck by a powerful attack. The blonde youth is violently thrown against the wall, leaving the other brother shocked. His face contorted in pain, the boy screams as he loses consciousness inside the crater in the wall. Desperate, Grika calls out for his brother and spots a mysterious silhouette emerging from the doorway. The other young men wonder what that sound was and what is going on. From the doorway, Seek emerges carrying the monster, remarking that they should have covered their tracks. The young men are absolutely terrified by the sight of the boy and the slain monster. Shrouded in a golden aura and carrying the creature on his shoulders, the youth stares them down. With a sinister smirk, he says he has questions, but first, he wants to thank them for everything. He slams the creature's corpse onto the floor, startling everyone present. The protagonist then walks to the center of the hall, staring down everyone gathered there. At that moment, the image of his past life as Chrono overlaps with his current body. He looks at his own hand, contemplating the strange mana he managed to wield once more. The young man notices that this time, it doesn't hurt like it did the first time he used the power. He wonders if this has to do with the 3-minute limit, or if there is another reason. With a focused gaze, the boy decides not to dwell on it for now and concentrates on his goal. The other men watch him in silence as the golden aura completely envelops him. One of the young men asks if that is really Seek, since he shouldn't have any mana at all. With a cold stare, the protagonist ignores the comments, thinking that none of this matters. He knows there is no time to waste, as he has only one single goal in mind. Sword in hand, he demands to know where Gilgren is, ordering them to answer. The men are frightened and confused, unable to comprehend what the boy is talking about. Suddenly, a voice asks him to stop, and someone quickly approaches him. A pink-haired girl appears and begs young master Seek to stop all of this. The protagonist is surprised and highly confused by the girl's sudden appearance. The young woman puts on a determined expression while muttering something to the young master. She runs toward him, shouting that the young master knows brothers are supposed to get along. The protagonist is completely lost in this situation, wondering who this girl is. Then a man appears with two identical girls, apologizing for the massive disturbance. He begs forgiveness on Seek's behalf and drags the girls away as he says goodbye to everyone. Everyone remains silent, staring at the boy slumped in the crater of the wall without a reaction. One of the young men asks what that was all about, while another replies that he has no clue. Later that night, the scene shifts to a different part of the massive mansion. Near a lit candle, we see a hand delicately holding a ring. The girl from earlier sighs while Seek watches her from the bed with a scowl. She then asks what the young master was thinking to cause such a scene. She questions whether he has any idea what kind of trouble that will bring. With an annoyed expression, the protagonist merely clicks his tongue in response to the lecture. He tells her she is annoying and asks who she is, while she complains about his attitude. The girl tells him to listen and explains that in this household, power is absolutely everything. Worried, she begins to say that when she thinks about it, Belle gets very anxious. The boy continues to stare at her in silence, while she seems very nervous about everything. In her thoughts, she concludes that true to his name, he really cannot use mana. The girl's face flushes and she looks away, seeming highly embarrassed. At that, she begins tapping her foot on the floor, showing just how nervous she is. The young woman then reveals that she is his maid and has been watching over him all this time. While preparing a drink, she mentions that she saw all his hard work during training. Yet despite everything, he is trapped in the sorrow of being unable to turn his mana into power. Holding a tray, she explains that mana is the life force that exists in every human being, and that only a chosen few can convert it into actual power to use in battle. She goes on to explain about the 7 levels of mana that measure a person's skill. In her thoughts, she remembers that his brothers have already reached level 4. With that, the maid offers a cup of tea to the boy, who observes her in silence. The hot steam from the drink rises and passes over his face while he remains serious. Kneeling on the floor, she says that everyone in the house despises him and that his room is small. Suddenly, the protagonist touches a scar on his neck and is somewhat surprised. He continues to feel the mark on his skin, with a drop of sweat running down his face. The girl then reveals that Grika gave him that scar when he was 5 years old. Holding his hand, she says she remembers every wound he has ever suffered in his life. With tears in her eyes, the maid says that her only wish is to keep the young master safe. The protagonist simply observes her in silence with a serious expression on his face. He then picks up the cup and says he's lost his temper and will be more careful from now on. With that, the young warrior takes a sip of the hot drink that the girl prepared for him. After drinking, he returns the cup to the maid, who stares at him with teary eyes. With a slight smile, the boy apologizes for having made her so worried about him. The young woman's face flushes and she awkwardly stammers an okay to her master. But the girl stares at him with an expression of doubt and curiosity on her face. She then asks how he managed to win the fight without having any mana. The protagonist understands that the maid did not see him using his golden powers before. In his thoughts, he knows he cannot explain that he died and was reincarnated in Seek's body. The girl then asks if he happened to use any kind of dirty trick in the fight. The young man agrees with the girl and says that was the best way to end the matter. She says she wanted him to grow up proud, but that she can't blame him after everything. The boy then says that no one in the house will reprimand him for taking the others by surprise. He was about to ask something about Gilgren, but the sound of the door opening interrupted him. A guard informs Seek that his father has returned and requests his presence in the West Hall. The young man is surprised and repeats the word father in his thoughts without understanding. Then 2 guards open a huge door and a voice says, "You are here from the other side." A white-haired man calls him his useless son and stares at him with great contempt. The boy's eyes widened in pure shock and hatred as he recognized that man. Trembling with rage, the protagonist can barely say the name of his greatest enemy, Gilgren. He wonders, shocked, why the wretch who ruined his life is right there. With a cold and authoritative look, the white-haired man orders the boy to come closer. Then it dawns on him that the head of the house is none other than Gilgren, his archenemy. Sweating profusely and grinding his teeth, the boy could barely contain his hatred at that moment. The memory of the shadowy creature offering him a chance for revenge returns to his mind. With a wicked grin, he thinks the whole situation has just become very interesting. The young man thinks that his enemy spared him the trouble of hunting him down and that he will kill him now. With the maid by his side, the protagonist faces his greatest enemy with hatred in his eyes. But when he tries to use his power, he realizes he can't and curses the situation. Desperate, he wonders why he can't use his mana at this precise moment. The white-haired man then says that he was the one who called him there in that hall. The boy stares at him, sweat dripping down his face and his heart racing. His enemy then asks if it is true that he managed to defeat young Grika. The maid becomes very worried beside the boy, who doesn't say a single word. In despair, the girl kneels and begs for mercy from her young master. But in a cold voice, the white-haired man orders her to be quiet. Terrified, the young woman cowers on the floor and begins to tremble with pure fear in front of everyone. The man says he won't punish him but is curious about the trick he used. The protagonist is surprised and annoyed by his enemy's direct question. Suddenly, a multi-headed chained hydra appears behind its enemy. The red creature growls at the boy, its eyes glowing a deep purple. The protagonist recognizes the creature as an undead hydra and becomes serious. The man then says that in that family power is everything and challenges him to show his. The creature approaches the boy, who stares at it without showing the slightest hint of fear. The maid falls to the ground in fright, and the young master continues to stare at the creature. The girl shouts that the monster's mana level is 5, then corrects it to 6. With one of its heads, the creature begs the young master to flee immediately. The hydra then unleashes a powerful purple energy attack toward the boy. The beam of energy grazes the young man, who manages to dodge it at the last second. In the movement to dodge, he grabs the maid and protects her from the deadly attack. The protagonist believes that even the strongest hydras only reach level 4. He faces the creature and realizes that without his mana there is no chance of victory. The young man also thinks about the golden mana, but doesn't know how to activate it again. He then picks up a sword that has fallen to the ground and prepares for the combat that is to come. With a look full of hatred, the boy says that he no longer cares about anything. He decides he doesn't care what happens as long as he kills the bastard. Holding the sword firmly, he prepares to use his power once more. The young man faces the giant creature and charges towards it without hesitation. The maid screams in terror upon seeing the suicidal determination of her young master. With a swift movement, the protagonist cuts off all the hydra's heads at once. The blow is so powerful that a large explosion of purple energy occurs in the hall. The boy stops with a serious look, and his eye shines with an intense and powerful purple. The white-haired man simply observes him with a surprised expression on his face. Enveloped by a red aura and with an injured arm, the young man faces his enemy. The maid calls him young master, shocked by what she has just witnessed. She wonders how he gathered so much mana, reaching the 7th level of power. The boy watches her out of the corner of his eye with a serious and concentrated expression. The white-haired man then praises him with a sadistic and mocking smile on his face. He realizes that his son did not react to the hydra and that the hydra meant nothing to him. With a wicked grin, the boy says that it doesn't matter what he's hiding because he knows what to do. He points his sword at his enemy and says that now it is his turn to pay. With his sword in hand, the young man prepares to attack the man who sits on the throne. He charges forward with everything he's got, while his enemy merely watches him with a smile on his face. The maid is terrified watching the scene unfold before her, unable to react. With tears in her eyes, she calls out to the young master in a tone of pure despair. The girl yells at him not to continue and to stop the attack immediately. But the protagonist ignores her and with a cold look, tells Belle to stay back and not interfere. In a serious and hateful voice, he threatens her, saying he will kill her if she gets in his way. The maid is completely shocked and terrified by her master's threat. She falls to her knees on the floor, trembling with fear and unable to utter a single word. With a swift blow, the boy knocks her out so that she can no longer get involved in the fight. He glances at her out of the corner of his eye with a cold, determined expression on his face. After ensuring her safety, the young man turns his attention to his enemy. The white-haired man compliments the boy's gaze with a satisfied smile. He says his mana is strong enough to take down his hydra and that he has changed. With a sadistic look, the man asks what the boy intends to do next. The protagonist says he's going to tear him apart right there, and his red aura intensifies. Without wasting any time, the young man charges at his enemy with his sword, wielding everything he has. He leaps into the air and prepares a powerful strike to end the fight once and for all. With his eyes blazing red and filled with fury, the young man screams as he attacks. The white-haired man easily dodges the blow and prepares a counterattack. He lands a powerful punch on the boy, who is thrown hard against the ground. With no time to react, the protagonist is bombarded by several attacks in quick succession. Fallen and with his body bruised, the young warrior grinds his teeth in pain and frustration. In his thoughts, he is astonished by the sheer power of his enemy. The man then warns him not to get distracted and advances to launch a new attack. With a swift blow, he hits the protagonist, who begins to spit blood. In an instant, the white-haired man appears behind the boy and attacks him again. The protagonist barely manages to defend himself from the attacks and is thrown far away. Enveloped by the red aura, the young man leaps into the air for one last desperate attack. But his enemy blocks the blow with his sword without much difficulty and smiles. With a swift movement, the white-haired man disarms him and throws him to the ground. With a mocking smile on his face, he observes the fallen and defenseless boy in front of him. He says it's still not enough, but that it's a big difference from the weakling he used to be. With his face full of pain and anger, the boy tries to get up but can barely move. The man then asks how he acquired that strength and if it awakened his blood. The red aura begins to dissipate, and the boy remains silent on the ground. He realizes that the situation is the same as in his past life and becomes desperate. The memory of being defeated and humiliated comes back to his mind with great force. He knows that the enemy's power is not just strong, but something far beyond that. In his thoughts, he understands that there is something wrong with that man's mana. He realizes that if he continues attacking like this, the only thing that awaits him is death. His instincts as a sword saint screamed at him to retreat and flee from that fight. Fallen and powerless, he curses the situation and wonders if he will lose again. In a mocking tone, the man asks why he is silent and provokes him. The boy remains on the ground, saying nothing, while the red aura completely disappears. With a satisfied smile, the man says that silence is a great answer. He speaks of the family creed where righteousness is victorious and sin is weak. The man then says he will ignore the fact that he raised his sword against him. He offers the boy a reward and tells him what his wish is. The protagonist is shocked by the proposal and wonders what he should do. The memory of his teammates calling him captain comes rushing back to his mind. He also remembers his wife's smile and her tragic death in his arms. Lying on the ground, he thinks he's already died once and that now he needs to do the right thing. With this, he decides that he needs to drag all of his enemies' secrets into the light. The white-haired man stares at him in silence, patiently awaiting his response. Kneeling, the boy says he wants to see his father's command of the undead. The man is surprised by the request and repeats the young man's words with curiosity. With his gaze fixed on his enemy, the protagonist firmly affirms his desire. The white-haired man stares at him for a moment and seems to consider the proposal. After a moment, he tells the boy to follow him and turns to leave the hall. The scene then changes to a dark and gloomy corridor lit only by torches. The man opens a secret door and enters a dark and mysterious passage. He goes down a spiral staircase and asks the boy to explain why he's interested in this. The young man follows him in silence, and the staircase seems to descend to a very deep place. He then explains that he felt his father's strength through the mana of the Hydra he faced, and he thought he could learn something from this in order to become stronger. The white-haired man simply says, "I understand," and continues down the stairs. Suddenly, the boy starts to feel weak and asks what is happening to him. But he disguises it and says it's nothing and that he's just a little tired from the fight. In his thoughts, he curses the situation for happening at that particular moment. Gritting his teeth, he says that he absolutely cannot faint there for the sake of his men. And even less so for his beloved wife Hannah, whom he loves so much and whose death he wants to avenge. The scene then changes and a flashback begins showing a city at night. In a luxurious hall, the protagonist from his past life stands very serious. He seems to be waiting for someone and turns his face away with a very annoyed expression. Suddenly, his wife appears and asks how his dress looks and if it suits her. Upon seeing her, the warrior is completely speechless and can only say her name. With his arms crossed, he says he doesn't know and that clothes don't matter much. His wife then reprimands him, saying that's not how things work anymore. She reminds him that as the saint of the sword, he is the pride of the empire and she is his wife. The girl then carefully adjusts his clothes and helps him to look more presentable. With a smile, she says he looks wonderful and praises him with much love. The warrior's face flushes, but he tries to hide it with a serious expression. With her eyes closed and a radiant smile, the young woman seems very happy beside him. Back in the present, the boy clenches his fist tightly, remembering his beloved. In his thoughts, he apologizes to his wife for not being able to protect her. He swears to himself that he will finish off that wretch no matter what. The white-haired man says they've arrived, and the boy glares at him with hatred. Standing in front of a huge door, the man says that this is the place he wanted to be. He then opens the door and enters the dark and mysterious place without saying anything more. The protagonist then enters and is completely shocked by what he sees. A huge room is filled with zombies of all shapes and sizes. From atop a platform, he observes the terrifying scene, unable to believe what he sees. With wide eyes and cold sweat, he wonders what kind of place this is. The boy remains silent, completely paralyzed by the shock and horror of the scene. The man then explains that the dead have no emotions or will of their own. But every now and then something interesting emerges among the undead he creates. The boy's eyes widen in sheer shock as he sees a familiar figure among them. He sees a zombie woman who cries incessantly and seems very sad about something. The man says she appears to be waiting for someone and observes her curiously. The protagonist recognizes the woman and whispers the name of his beloved wife, Hannah. Her enemy then questions whether, even in death, she is still searching for something. With a wicked grin, he holds the zombie's head and asks what's wrong. He then offers it to the boy and tells him to come closer and take a good look. The white-haired man holds her tightly while the zombie fights relentlessly. The image of his wife in that situation makes the young man's blood boil with pure hatred. Gritting his teeth, he screams in his thoughts that he will kill that bastard. With his eyes bulging with veins, he struggles to restrain himself from attacking his enemy right there. In his thoughts, he asks his beloved to wait for him because he is going to kill Gilgren. He swears he will discover the secret of that man's power, even if he has to crawl. The boy is shocked to see a horde of undead in front of him and wonders what it is. The white-haired man stares at him with a smile and says that the dead have no emotions. He goes on to explain that the creatures do not possess free will in any way. But the man says that every now and then an interesting zombie appears, and this is one of them. Then a zombie that won't stop crying appears floating in front of the two of them. With a mocking look, the man asks if it doesn't seem like she's waiting for someone. The protagonist recognizes the woman and whispers the name of his beloved wife, Hannah. His enemy then questions what is wrong and asks if this is what he wanted to see. With a wicked grin, he offers the creature and tells the boy to come closer for a better look. The undead woman tries to reach out to the boy while attempting to say his name. Back in his room, the young man lies down but cannot sleep, remembering the scene. Outside, a heavy rain falls while he remains awake in his bed. He sits on the bed with a vacant stare, and the light of a lamp illuminates the room. In his thoughts, he vows to his beloved that he will endure a little longer for her. With a clenched fist, he vows to kill Gilgren with his own hands. The protagonist vows to himself that he will discover the man's secret and take revenge. The next day, the scene changes to the front of the mansion with a beautiful blue sky. Suddenly, someone knocks on the young man's bedroom door, interrupting his thoughts. Maid Belle enters the room and greets her young master with a good morning. She is surprised to see that the boy is already awake and stares at him with wide eyes. The girl remarks that he is already standing, and the young man simply confirms with a single word. The maid apologizes for the delay and says she will bring him some hot tea. Carefully, the young woman serves a cup of hot tea to the boy who is watching her. She glances at him out of the corner of her eye with a worried and slightly nervous expression. The protagonist continues looking out the window, without saying a single word to the girl. The memory of the threat he made the previous day comes back to the maid's mind. The young woman trembles with fear and takes a step back with a very frightened expression. She then apologizes for what happened yesterday, and he says he lost his composure. The girl says that he finally awakened her mana and that she was shocked by its power. With a smile, she says that more than anything she is very happy for her young master. The boy thinks that to kill Gilgren, he needs to unravel the mystery of his power. He reflects that surprise attacks and cheap tricks won't work against that man. The protagonist wonders what kind of sinister mana that is and doesn't understand anything about it. He then realizes that he doesn't have enough information to begin his revenge plan. The maid starts to cry and asks why he is ignoring her like that. She sobs and says that she did her best for Lord Gilgren for the sake of the young master. The boy denies it and explains that he is not ignoring her and that he was just thinking about something. The girl says that he has come to hate her but that she will still continue to serve him. The young man then decides to ask her if she knows anything about Gilgren's mana. The maid is confused by the question, and the boy says that any information will do. She says she doesn't know anything, but that she's never felt a life-sucking creature nearby. The protagonist then realizes that the young woman also felt that strange sensation. He thinks that mana is life itself, a pure vital force, and that something is wrong. But his enemy's mana contradicts this, and he thinks this might be the key to the secret. The young man remains silent for a moment, and continues to think about what he has just discovered. The young woman says she is worried about tomorrow's exam and wishes it could be postponed. The protagonist is surprised by the maid's words and stares at her curiously. He stands up and asks the girl what kind of exam this is, and she is confused by the question. She explains that it is the home training exam that he can take now that he is 10 years old. With a serious look, the boy repeats her words about the Gilgren family's training. But with a cold look, the boy says he's not interested and that he doesn't have time to waste. The maid insists that in the Gilgren household everyone takes the exam at age 10, and that it's a serious matter. She explains that those who don't show up or fail are exiled because the weak have no place there. The protagonist remains silent, processing the new information with a serious expression. In his thoughts, he wonders why his enemy is so obsessed with proving his strength. The young man then wonders if the exam has any connection to the secret of his father's power. With that, he asks Belle if passing the test will bring him closer to his target. The girl replies that if he passes, he could be assigned to the guard unit. She explains that even the lowest-ranking soldier in the guard receives direct orders from the Lord. The boy understands the opportunity before him and says he understands the situation. The scene then changes to the location of the exam, which looks like a large castle or academy. In the main courtyard, several young people are gathered, waiting for the start of training. A blond boy with a bandage on his face notices the arrival of a new person. The protagonist arrives at the location accompanied by his maid Belle, who is worried. With a determined look, the young man stares at the other participants, who observe him with disdain. The blonde boy recognizes him as Zeke and wonders what he's doing there. Another young person questions whether Zeke, without mana, is really planning to take the exam. The blonde man scoffs, saying he was sure he would jump ship and be kicked out of the family. He then comments that the boy must be full of himself after what happened the other day. Concerned, the maid asks her young master not to overexert himself on the test. The girl says that if he gets hurt anymore, she will be very worried about him. The protagonist calls her persistent and tells her not to worry because she will be fine. In his thoughts, the young man admits that the truth is quite different from what it appears to be. He thinks he doesn't know how far he can go in this body, but he can't be expelled. To discover Gilgren's secret, he needs to stick around, and this is his chance. With that in mind, he decides that he will pass the exam as Zeke, no matter what. And then he will expose the secret and kill his enemy to save his beloved Hannah. Suddenly, a voice calls to him from behind, and he turns around to see who it is. A group of 3 bullies stares at him, and the leader asks what he's doing there. The bully jumps in front of the boy, and the maid is startled by the sudden appearance. The young man scoffs, saying it's impressive that he returned from Gangstable in one piece. The group leader stares at him and tells him not to even think about taking the exam that day. With a look of disdain, he says that the test is no playground for a weakling like him. He orders the boy to go back to his room and play with Belle and threatens to punch him. But the protagonist grabs the fist of the bully who is provoking him and asks what he thinks he's doing. With a cold, contemptuous look, the boy says that he is very annoying and boring. The bully gets furious and prepares to punch the young man with all his might. Suddenly, a loud impact echoes and everyone is confused, not understanding what happened. The protagonist lands a powerful punch to the bully's face, leaving him in shock. The blow is so strong that the boy is thrown backward and crashes onto the ground. The other 2 bullies and the maid are completely shocked by the scene. Lying on the ground, the bully faints, and everyone wonders what Zeke just did. The protagonist says he won't wake up for at least half a day and stares at the others. The blonde boy is shocked and wonders since when that weakling knows how to fight. With his teeth clenched in anger, the blonde man can't believe what he's seeing. Suddenly, a man appears and says that's enough and that the show is over. The man with glasses and a mustache tells everyone to gather because the exam is about to begin. The protagonist simply gives a slight smile with a confident and victorious expression. The scene shows the courtyard again, with all the young people gathered around the fountain. The man explains that the 23 gathered are Gilgren's heirs and candidates for the exam. One of the young people asks aloud if the count of 23 participants is correct. All the other candidates shout yes, and the man with the mustache says he understands the answer. He then picks up a scroll and says that even though everyone knows the rules, he will read them aloud. The first rule states that they will test the strength of all who have Gilgren's blood. He explains that the guard unit exists solely to serve Lord Gilgren. This is a small elite force that is under the direct command of the family lord. Their missions include subjugations and military operations and everything else that is necessary, and that only those who pass the exam are qualified to join the unit. The test itself is a survival test on a mountain teeming with bloodthirsty beasts. The man then warns that every year some people die in the forest and that they should prepare themselves. The protagonist listens to everything with a serious and focused expression on his face. Suddenly, a voice announces that in addition to everything else, this year they are going to add one more rule. The young people are completely shocked by the news and stare at the approaching figure. To everyone's surprise, Lord Gilgren himself appears in the examination courtyard. Immediately, all participants kneel as a sign of respect and submission. But the protagonist remains standing and faces his enemy with a look full of hatred. He clenches his teeth in pure rage and frustration as he sees the man in front of him. The image of his beloved wife transformed into a zombie comes back to his mind with force. In his thoughts, he vows that he will pass the exam to become a sheik, no matter what. With blood running down his leg, he prepares to kneel before everyone. With difficulty and filled with hatred, the young warrior finally kneels on the ground. He stares at the Lord, his eyes gleaming red, and calls him by name in his mind. The white-haired man watches him with a sadistic and mocking smile on his face. He then announces that the extra rule is that each of them must protect an undead, and that during the exam each one will receive a zombie and risk their life to protect it. One of the young men thinks that this must be a rehearsal to protect him in the future. The protagonist remains silent and simply stares at his enemy with hatred in his eyes. A guard then approaches and places an iron chain on the wrist of each participant. All the young people are chained to the undead that they must protect in the exam. With open arms, the Lord explains that the mana supply for the undead has been cut off. This means that if they die they will not be revived, and that protecting them will be worthwhile. The boy stares at the zombie chained to him with an expression of disgust and contempt. In his thoughts he curses the Lord and calls him a wretched, sick, and madman. With an expression of pure disgust, the boy wonders what the hell that thing in front of him is. One of the young men complains that his zombie is crying and says that it's disgusting. Suddenly, the protagonist realizes with horror that he is trapped with none other than his wife's zombie. Lord Gilgren stares at him with a wicked smile, satisfied with the situation he has created. With a face contorted with hatred, the young man calls him a piece of trash in his thoughts. The man then tells his sons to go and show their strength, and they all shout in response. The boy swears he will pass the exam and then kill that bastard. A hand with a purple aura appears and a voice says that the first test is survival, and that they must guard the zombie that was assigned to each of them in the exam. All participants unanimously answer yes and prepare for the test. Through clenched teeth filled with rage, the young man vows to himself that he will pass that test. He needs to get closer to Gilgren to discover the secret behind his power. And who doesn't care what they need to do as long as they get to the end of the exam? With the image of his companions, he vows to kill Gilgren and save Hannah. The scene then returns to the conversation with Belle about the family's special training. The young woman explains that the training involves hunting wild animals in the forest, and also to hunt magical beasts and in some cases even other human beings. The young man listens attentively to each word with a serious and focused look on his face. The girl says she heard about them throwing siblings onto a deserted island and raising the survivors. She then says that for someone like her, all of that seems cruel and that he remembers it well. The boy nods in confirmation, but realizes he doesn't know anything about it firsthand. Back in the present, the maid looks at him and asks if anything about it bothered him. With a distant look, the young protagonist says no and tries to hide his surprise. He then says that everyone in that house only talks about strength and wonders if it's really that bad. The young woman explains that the history of the house is recent, but the customs have existed for decades. And with this creed they grew into a strong martial house, recognized by all. In his thoughts, the boy senses that something is wrong because the family is new. He wonders why they are so obsessed with power if they don't have much honor to protect. Looking at a Gilgram painting, he thinks that instead of answers there are only more questions. The maid says that he too, as a young master, needs to follow these house customs. With a sad and worried look, the girl continues her speech about his future. She says that if the Lord doesn't recognize him, he can't stay and that she's prepared. But if he can somehow remain in that large and dangerous mansion, young Belle would be happier than anything else in the whole world. The protagonist listens to everything in silence and becomes thoughtful about the maid's words. Back in the examination courtyard, the hands of all participants are chained. The blonde boy is disgusted to be chained to a zombie that won't stop crying. He then asks if he can switch undead because he won't be able to hunt like this. But the mustachioed man says the Lord's decision is final and that the chains are magical. The young man insists and says that losing points because of that will be the worst thing of all. Suddenly Lord Gilgren tells him to do whatever he wants and stares at him with disdain. He then says that if he has real strength, the undead doesn't matter and that if he doesn't leave. Terrified, the boy apologizes and says that's not what he meant to say to his father. With a clenched fist, he shouts that he will complete the race without fail and the protagonist watches. The white-haired man stares at him for a moment and seems not to care about the promise. He then turns to leave the place and gives his back to all the young participants. The Lord says he understands and tells him to do his best because he expects good results. With a huge grin, the blonde boy happily thanks his father. The man observes him for a moment and seems to be waiting for something else to happen. The blonde boy then turns around and calls out Sheik's name in a mocking tone. But to his surprise, Lord Gilgren turns around and asks what he wants with his son. The protagonist then says that he will pass the exam and earn the right to stay by her side. With his eye glowing red, he tells his enemy to just wait and see. The white-haired man stares at him with a serious expression and a hint of surprise on his face. He then says that everything depends on their strength and that they must prove their worth to him. With that, the Lord disappears in a purple mist, and the blonde boy says that he is gone. Furious, he yells at the protagonist and accuses him of disrespecting their father. The protagonist then calls him by name and stares at him with a serious, cold expression. With a menacing look, he tells the blonde man not to dare lay a finger on the undead creature. Through clenched teeth, he threatens him, saying that the second time he does it, he will kill him. The boy then turns his back to the blonde boy and walks away without saying another word. Shocked and confused, the young man wonders what he is talking about and why it doesn't make sense. In his thoughts, he wonders if the protagonist is declaring him a rival. With a face full of anger, he understands that the boy is telling him not to give up. But with a mocking smile, he says he doesn't need his pity and calls him little brother. The mustachioed man then gets everyone's attention and asks if they are ready to begin. Holding a lamp in his hand, he announces that time is up and the first exam is about to begin. The man says that the flame entrusted to them by Gilgren will finally signal the start of the test. With that, a purple flame emerges from the lamp and envelops all the participants in a strange light. The protagonist faces the power with a serious expression as the energy completely envelops him. He then realizes that it is actually a powerful teleportation spell. In the empty courtyard, the mustachioed man and the maid observe the place in silence for a moment. Then the man wishes that fortune would favor the young people, while the girl stares at him worriedly. Young Belle whispers her young master's name with a very sad expression on her face. The scene then changes to a dense forest, and a purple light indicates that someone has arrived. The boy appears chained to the undead creature and looks around to assess the new location. Looking at his zombie companion, the young man says that it seems they have finally arrived. He then assumes that the other participants must have been thrown somewhere else in the forest. The pair then begin walking through the forest, which has giant mushrooms and a giant skull along the way. In the distance, we see the boy and his undead companion walking through the forest in search of something. With a watchful eye, the protagonist continues his journey through the dark and dangerous forest. He senses someone's presence and says it's not another candidate because there's no intention to kill. The young man turns around and wonders if that might be a test examiner. Your attention is drawn to a purple smoke that appears to be floating among the trees. The smoke forms words that explain the rules of the first survival exam. The boy reflects on how cruel his family is and that the victor always brings justice. He then thinks that the answer to Gilgren's obsession lies beyond that examination. With a serious and determined expression, the young man faces the challenge before him. Suddenly, a large black bird appears in the sky and the boy stares at it, surprised by the noise. The enormous creature with glowing eyes advances toward the two of them at great speed. The young man says that a magical beast has already appeared and that this saves him the trouble of hunting one. In his thoughts, he remembers that he has already died once and that now he has a second life, and that he cannot make mistakes with this new chance while the monster approaches. He then leaps toward the creature and says that this might be the fastest way. With a look full of hatred, he shouts that he will pass the test as chic no matter what. The magical beast opens its mouth and lets out a terrifying roar in the direction of the young warrior. The protagonist uses the undead creature as leverage to jump and attack it in midair. With a swift movement, he cuts off the monster's wing with his sword in a precise blow. The creature then begins to fall towards the ground completely out of control. The giant bird falls to the ground defeated, and the boy gasps for breath after the fight. He thinks his past experiences with escort missions are proving useful now. But suddenly a new noise catches the young man's attention and he looks to the side, startled. From the trees, a giant gorilla with purple lightning bolts emerges, roaring and ready for battle. The monkey attacks the other beast, and the protagonist needs to move away to avoid being hit. Irritated, the boy complains that the monsters are appearing one after another without stopping. With a confident smile, he says that he has already lost twice and will not lose again. He then faces the two beasts and says he will use them to warm up. The protagonist leaps into the air again and prepares to face the two monsters. After the fight, the two creatures are lying on the ground, and the young man says that this should settle things. He wonders if the examiners are even keeping score somewhere. With his eyes closed, the boy senses a new presence approaching him from behind. The young man turns around and manages to dodge a swift attack that came his way. He is surprised by the attack and doesn't understand what just happened in front of him. A boy with blue hair praises him and says that he didn't do too badly for a weakling with no mana. The protagonist asks who he is and what he wants with him at that moment of tension. The young man with blue hair simply gives a sly smile with a very mocking look. He tells you to skip the conversation and that he'll turn you into animal food right after. The protagonist, with a mocking smile, says that a weakling without mana doesn't even deserve to live. He thinks this is the kind of thing his family would do and that he hates all of this. The young man then reminds him that justice is victorious and that all his actions are forgiven. With a cold look, he says that since his enemy attacked first, he shouldn't expect any mercy. The opponent is impressed and says that he's not bad at all for someone without a drop of mana. The opponent's sword begins to glow with an intense and dangerous bluish energy. With a furious cry, the boy lunges forward and calls the protagonist by name, hatred in his eyes. But the young man stares at him and says that since he attacked first, he will have no mercy on him. With a determined look in his eyes, the boy vows that he will show all his strength now. The enemy gives a wry smile and calls him a monoless abomination with utter contempt. With that, he advances at full speed to attack the protagonist with his sword. The young man promises that the protagonist will be the first to abandon the exam and glares at him with hatred. He then throws a bag on the ground to create a distraction and catch the boy by surprise. But the protagonist sees through the trick and says it was a low blow to use a fake arm. Suddenly, the bag explodes in a bright light right in the face of the blue-haired boy. The young man shouts that it serves him right, but is caught off guard by the very trap he created. The protagonist emerges from the smoke without a scratch, and the enemy is left confused by the scene. With a swift movement, he passes his opponent and strikes him in the leg with a precise blow. The young man screams in pain and staggers backward, his leg injured by the surprise attack. Lying on the ground, the boy screams in pain while the protagonist watches him with a cold stare. The young man explains that it was just an afterimage and asks if he has ever seen one. He says the humidity of the forest helped and that it was easy even on Sheik's body. The enemy shouts that he is not making sense and that he doesn't understand anything he is saying. The boy then reveals that before reincarnating, he encountered guys like him all the time. He shows the fake arm and says he figured out the plan from his opponent's posture and face. Angrily, the young man grabs him and tells him not to underestimate him, calling him a third-rate brat. Defeated, the blue-haired boy curses his luck as the chain swings in the air. With a sweaty face and teeth clenched in anger, the young man couldn't believe what had happened. He wonders how he could have lost to someone like Sheik while the protagonist watches him. Desperate, the young man grabs a dagger and shouts that he will not lose to him under any circumstances. The protagonist then says that this is why he is a loser and stares at him with contempt. He steps on the enemy's hand and says that his body and eyes reveal everything he is going to do. Completely defeated and with no chance to fight back, the young man can only curse his fate. The boy thinks that in an exam like this, attacking someone's weakness is an effective move. The image of the blonde boy with the crying zombie returns to his mind with great force and clarity. With his gaze focused, the protagonist seems to have reached a new conclusion about the exam. With a swift and precise strike, he cuts the chain that binds the boy to his undead creature. The magic chain breaks into several pieces and the undead is finally freed. The young man stares at the broken chain in horror and screams in utter despair at the scene. The boy then turns around and says that it's over for him and that he should enjoy being expelled from the exam. On his knees, the defeated boy begins to disappear in a strange, black smoke in the air. With a cold and determined look, the young man tells himself not to make the wrong move. He needs to kill Gilgren and save Hannah, and to do that he needs to focus on what's necessary. From afar, a hooded figure observes the scene with the defeated boy on the forest floor. The mysterious man comments that they already have the first dropout for that year's exam. He wonders if that is really the young master who fights like a seasoned veteran. He writes it down in his notebook and wonders about the force and what suddenly happened to him. Elsewhere in the forest, the blonde boy sits wearily beside his zombie. With his arm wounded, the young man curses his fate and stares at the creature with disgust and contempt. Suddenly, a loud noise echoes and a giant monster paw stomps on the ground near him. A gigantic, boar-like beast appears in front of the blonde youth with a furious look. He complains about his bad luck because the first creature he encountered had to be rank A. The enormous monster prepares to attack the boy, who is paralyzed with fear behind the rock. With a powerful punch, the beast destroys the rock and throws the boy away, screaming. As he flies through the air, the young man curses his luck and grips his sword tightly with anger. From a distance, the hooded man observes the scene with the monster staring at its two victims. In his thoughts, the man says that it's over and that young Grika has no chance at all. The beast advances again, and the boy continues cursing his luck with great frustration. With clenched teeth, he thinks he can't fight anymore and that he has reached his limit. He then considers using the undead creature as bait, since he must have already failed the test. The young man stares at the creature beside him and hesitates for a moment before making his decision. But he remembers the protagonist's threat to kill him if he hurt the zombie. The boy clenches his teeth in pure rage and frustration at the memory of that conversation. With that, he shouts that he understands what his rival was trying to say with that threat. In his mind, he remembers the young man's words to pass the exam without harming the creature. With a determined look in his eyes, the blonde boy seemed to have made a new decision. He then recalls his rival saying that if he were his rival, it wouldn't be anything. The young man faces the beast and, through clenched teeth, says that he understood his rival's message. He shouts that he's going to do it because he's not going to show something pathetic to his new rival. With a firm and determined step, the boy prepares to face the beast with everything he has. He runs towards the giant monster with his sword in hand, ready for battle. The creature stares at him with its glowing red eyes and prepares to counterattack. With a devastating punch, the beast attacks the young man, who tries to dodge the deadly blow in midair. The boy barely manages to dodge and the punch hits a tree, breaking it on impact. With a bleeding nose and a sweaty face, the young man confronts his enemy with pure determination. He then begins to attack the beast with several sword blows that seem to have no effect. The hooded man observes the scene and says it's simply incredible to see. He is surprised that the boy is actually charging against such a strong creature. But the beast attacks again, and the young man is thrown far away by the force of the blow. The man says his courage deserves praise, but the power difference is too great. The creature begins to glow with a red energy, and the boy is left breathless on the ground. In despair, the young man thinks that this is truly the end for him and that there is no more hope. The beast then prepares the final blow, but is interrupted by a swift and mysterious attack. With its arm severed, the creature looks to the side, confused and surprised by what happened. Lying on the ground, the blonde boy doesn't understand what just happened and stares at the scene. Suddenly, the protagonist appears enveloped in a dark aura, and the young man calls out his name. The boy tells him to stop making that ugly face, with a contemptuous tone in his voice. Looking at the scene, he says that fortunately he managed to arrive in time to prevent the worst. He then reprimands the young man and says that if he uses mana, he should think about the difference in level. Surprised, the boy listens, and the protagonist asks if he came to save his rival. With a cold look, he says that if he doesn't want to die, it's better to risk his life to accompany him. The beast roars in pain and fury, its arm wounded by the young man's surprise attack. The giant monster stares at the two boys, while the young blonde boy remains on the ground, frightened. Lying on the ground, the blonde boy looks at the protagonist, who is enveloped in a dark aura. With an irritated look, he tells his rival to stop making that scary face. The blonde boy is shocked and speechless by his new rival's cold attitude. With a cold look, he warns that if the blonde doesn't want to die, he'd better risk everything to follow him. The protagonist then turns and faces the wounded beast, preparing for the next battle. But the blonde youth gets annoyed and yells at his rival not to act like he's all-powerful. He then states that he was about to defeat that creature alone without help. The boy just stares at him with a cold look of utter contempt for his attitude. Then the young man turns around and starts walking towards the blonde boy and his undead companion. The blonde boy then asks what he wants by approaching him so suddenly. He ignores the boy and continues to stare at the undead woman with a serious and focused look. Suddenly, two dark objects fly towards the creature, which appears frightened. With his eyes fixed, the young man attentively observes the objects approaching the zombie. With a somber look, he seems to be concentrating on some kind of mysterious plan. He then turns to the creature and promises that he will get it out of that situation. With eyes full of determination, he asks Hannah to just wait a little longer. The rival is confused and wonders if the young man is interested in his undead. He begins to wonder if the protagonist might like older, more mature women. But with a horrified look on his face, he wonders if his rival actually likes the dead. Changing scenes, we see someone serving a cup of tea in a luxurious setting. A man comments that there are more participants and wonders how many will survive the test. With a wry smile, the white-haired man stares at the magic sphere in front of him. In his thoughts, he says that those who lack strength are completely unnecessary. The other man comments that the B-rank beasts are already beyond the level of the participants. Suddenly, the man with glasses notices something in the sphere and is surprised by what he sees. His eyes wide, he can't believe the scene unfolding. He shouts that it's a rank of beast and that it shouldn't exist in that forest. The white-haired man merely confirms the information with a sinister smile on his face. The servant then asks, sweating profusely, if that was the work of Lord Gilgren who is watching him. Gilgren replies that this is just a bit of entertainment to liven things up. With that, the man with glasses says that this will be a very difficult ordeal for the young people. He thinks the power difference is immense and that no child can defeat the creature, especially considering the special abilities that that particular monster possesses. Back in the forest, the creature begins to be enveloped by purple lightning and regenerates. The rival becomes desperate and asks what the protagonist is doing standing there. The monster's severed arm regenerates completely in seconds. The blonde youth is shocked and shouts that the beast's regeneration is too fast. With a panicked expression, he says there is no chance of them defeating the creature. At that point, he starts running away desperately and yells for the protagonist to do the same. With a furious look, the protagonist turns around and calls his rival a complete idiot. The beast then notices the boy fleeing and turns its attention to him and the undead creature. With a deafening roar, the monster charges at full speed toward the frightened young man. The boy looks back in terror as he sees the giant creature approaching him. But when the monster is about to attack him, a sword blocks the blow at the last second. The protagonist defends against the attack, and the blonde boy is thrown to the ground by the impact. Completely shocked by the scene, the boy shouts his savior's name once more. The young man then stares at him and angrily asks what the hell he was thinking of doing. He rebukes him and says that it is obvious the beast would attack him if he turned his back. Angered by the attack, the giant creature stares at the young man with its red, furious eyes. Suddenly, the monster begins to glow with a purple energy, and its body becomes covered in lightning. The protagonist observes the scene with one eye closed and seems to understand what is about to happen. With a cry, the beast shoots several spines from its back toward the young warrior. He manages to dodge and block the attacks, but the force of the blows pushes him back. The young man hides behind a tree to protect himself from the rain of deadly thorns. In his thoughts, he analyzes the attack and says that the thorns grew and were thrown. The creature then begins to regenerate again, with purple rays coursing through its body. The thorns that were shot grow back on its back, and the beast recovers. The blonde boy is shocked and comments that the monster is incredible and has already regenerated again. But the beast attacks again, and the protagonist must struggle to dodge in midair. He thinks that no living creature should be able to regenerate that quickly. With this, the young man concludes that that wretched Gilgren must have done something to the beast. Irritated by the situation, he jumps into the air and says that all of this is very annoying. He then attacks the creature with his sword, but it regenerates instantly after the blow. The young blonde boy screams in shock as the monster heals again in the blink of an eye. With that, the protagonist steps back and faces the beast, which observes him with an intimidating gaze. He thinks that if he holds on a little longer, the creature will regenerate forever. With that, the boy considers using his old fencing skills, but no one there knows that style. And to make matters worse, the examiners are watching every move during that test. He then remembers Lord Gilgren and wonders if he was the one who orchestrated all of this. So if they see him using his techniques and start to suspect what will happen, the young man dodges another attack and leaps into the air to avoid being hit by the thorns. He wonders what would happen if they found out he's a reincarnated person there, or if they found out who he really is and what he's looking for in that place. With Hannah's image in his mind, the young man seems to be making a new and dangerous decision. He knows that if his plans are discovered, Hannah's future will be in great danger. With a determined look, the boy prepares to fight with everything he has now. He tells himself that he can't let that happen and that he needs to concentrate. A voice in his mind calms him and tells him that he already knows what he needs to do to win. The blonde boy is then shocked and asks how he suddenly became so strong. With a cold look, he tells his rival to shut up and says that he is simply too weak. The protagonist then grips the hilt of his sword with even more strength and determination. He clenches his hands so tightly that his fingers turn white with pure tension. Suddenly, an aura of purple and orange flames completely envelops the young warrior. From a distance, the hooded man is surprised and wonders what kind of posture that is. The protagonist thinks he cannot reveal his identity and that he cannot die there. With that, he decides that he will use his fencing skills to eliminate the beast, so as not to leave any trace. The creature stares at him with its glowing red eyes and prepares to attack. Enveloped in his fiery aura, the young man charges full speed toward the giant monster. Elsewhere, the man with glasses calls out to Lord Gilgren with a worried tone. The white-haired man simply observes the scene in the magic sphere with a serious look. The servant then says that he never imagined he would send an A-rank beast to the exam. He concludes by saying that even if they have his blood, there's no way a child can win. Back in the fight, the young man leaps into the air and prepares his final blow against the creature. The monster then opens its mouth and prepares to counterattack with a powerful beam. Irritated, the boy yells at the abomination to come at him with everything he's got and that he's going to blow it up, leaving nothing behind. The beast fires a beam of purple energy, and the young man confronts it with his flaming sword. The force of the attack is immense, and the protagonist needs to use all his strength to resist. The clash of the two powers creates an explosion of light that violently rises to the heavens. The blonde boy screams desperately at the intensity of the power being released there. The giant creature is completely engulfed by the powerful explosion of purple energy. With a final roar, the beast seems to be consumed by the intense light of its own attack. But suddenly, the protagonist manages to pass through the explosion with his aura of fire. With a firm step, he advances toward the creature, ready to counterattack. The young warrior runs through the explosion to strike the beast at its moment of weakness. Irritated, he complains that the monster tried to cancel the attack and kill him with the blow. The rival is completely shocked and speechless by the scene he has just witnessed. The attack opened a huge trench in the ground, and the beast is on the other side, wounded. The sky darkens and small particles begin to fall after the great explosion of power. But to everyone's surprise, the creature begins to regenerate again, little by little. The protagonist then realizes that his stamina will run out before he can win. Suddenly, the blonde boy calls him and points to something on the edge of the nearby cliff. The two young men then approach to see what caught the blonde boy's attention. Lying on the ground, they find a hooded man who appears to be badly injured. The protagonist recognizes him and says that he is one of the exam proctors who was caught in the attack. The rival is surprised because he didn't know they were being watched by inspectors. The young man then notices the man's eye and the blue flame that reminds him of someone familiar. With this, he understands that Gilgren was watching him and that he is no longer being seen. With a wry smile, the boy realizes that this is his chance to fight seriously. Enveloped in a dark aura, he says that he can now use his swordsmanship without being discovered. With a determined look, he vows that he will put an end to this before another inspector shows up. The blonde boy is then startled by his rival's sudden change of attitude. With a powerful step, the protagonist prepares to use his secret techniques. He then prepares to use the first form of his swordsmanship with the sword in hand. With a leap, a shadow in the shape of a giant bird appears and advances towards the creature. The shadow attacks the beast with its claws and throws it away with the force of the impact. The monster is thrown high into the air, completely defenseless against the dark attack. The young blonde man screams in astonishment upon seeing the incredible power his rival was hiding. It is revealed that this sword fighting style was created by the first emperor and has 7 forms, and that the only person capable of using all 7 forms is the hero Chrono Gaius. The young man then uses the 4th form of his swordsmanship, and a serpent of shadows appears. The snake coils around the beast's body and holds it tightly for the next attack. With the creature trapped, the protagonist advances with his sword for the final blow. He runs at full speed to seize the opportunity and end the fight. The boy then complains that his body and the undead creature are limiting his firepower. With that, he throws the zombie away and prepares for 2 more powerful blows. The protagonist concentrates, and a new aura of power begins to envelop him in the fight. He then uses the 3rd form, and a rhinoceros shadow advances against the monster. With the impact, a new explosion occurs, raising a huge cloud of dust into the air. Back at the palace, the magic sphere that Gilgren used to observe the fight breaks. The servant then asks worriedly if something wrong has happened to Lord Gilgren. With a serious and slightly irritated look, the white-haired man stares at the broken sphere. But with a wry smile, he seems more intrigued than concerned by the scene. He then tells his servant that it was nothing and that there is nothing to worry about. Back in the forest, the dust begins to settle and the destruction of the battle is revealed. The creature is still alive but badly injured and its regeneration is much slower. The protagonist then prepares to continue the fight and finish off the monster once and for all. But he realizes he's using too much mana and that the beast is still standing without any problems. With a determined look, he realizes he has no choice but to go all in. The creature stares at him with its glowing red eyes and prepares to attack with everything it has. But the protagonist creates a barrier of fire around himself to protect himself from the attack. The blonde boy screams desperately for his rival to run away because he has no way to defeat the beast. The young man explains that the attack has a long range and consumes a lot of mana at once. With that, he prepares to use the 2nd form of his swordsmanship to restrain the monster. He then summons a hunting dog cage made of golden energy to trap the beast. A giant shadow of a hunting dog emerges, and the cage forms around the creature. Trapped in the cage, the monster roars with fury and tries to break free from the energy bars. With a smirk, the protagonist says that he caught the beast and that now he can attack. With the creature trapped, he can see a magical core glowing inside it. He explains that every magical beast has a core and that it can be located inside the cage. With the core located, the young man prepares his sword for the final, decisive blow. With a determined look, he prepares to cut the creature down in one swift motion. The beast's magical core is cut in half and begins to shatter in midair with the blow. The young man then concludes that the core was tampered with and that it was Gilgren's work all along. The blonde boy is shocked and can't believe his rival actually managed to win. He wonders what kind of fencing that was because he's never seen anything like it before. Through clenched teeth, he thinks that if things continue like this, his position is at risk. Suddenly, the protagonist feels a sharp pain in his hand and falls to his knees on the ground. With a sweaty face, he curses his luck because his body couldn't withstand the power used. He then realizes that he has used up too much mana for too long and that his body couldn't handle it anymore. The young man faints and falls to the ground, completely exhausted after the long and difficult battle. The rival runs towards him, worried, and shouts his name to see if he's all right. He approaches and asks if the boy is still alive after using so much power at once. Suddenly, the body of the defeated beast begins to disintegrate into a strange, black smoke. The creature disappears completely, leaving only a pool of blood on the forest floor. The young blonde man stares at the scene in shock, while the undead woman observes him with a blank stare. In his mind, he remembers his mother's words reminding him of his noble lineage. She forbade him from suffering the disgrace of exile and urged him to be the best of all. His mother would make him step on his brothers if necessary to achieve his goals. And with a cold look she told him to conquer glory and win even if it meant killing. With wide eyes, the boy seems to have a new perspective on life and power. A sly smile appears on his face, and he seems to have made a new and dangerous decision. Suddenly the scene changes to a flowery field with a reddish sky and tranquility in the air. A man with red hair and armor wonders where he is and what happened. With a confused look, he doesn't recognize the place and seems lost in his memories. Suddenly he sees 3 shadowy figures approaching him in the field with blank stares. He realizes that the figures are undead beings staring at him with their glowing green eyes. The man is startled to see a horde of zombies approaching him with hostile intentions. But in the midst of the undead, he sees a familiar figureea woman in a white dress. With wide eyes, he can't believe what he's seeing right in front of him. The woman stares at him with a sad look, and the man is speechless at the surreal scene. He then recognizes the woman and whispers her name with a mixture of shock and surprise. With a sad smile on her face, the woman calls him darling in a soft, gentle voice. The man is speechless at her words and stares at her with a look of pure confusion. The woman then approaches and touches his face affectionately while calling him darling. But suddenly the scene changes, and the woman transforms into a terrifying creature and attacks him. With eyes full of hatred, the creature stares at him with an empty, lifeless gaze. The scene fades to black, and the man appears to be being consumed by the monstrous creature. Suddenly the protagonist wakes up startled in his bed, sweating profusely from the nightmare. The protagonist wakes up startled in his bed, with his heart racing after the nightmare. A female voice calls him young master and he stares at her, confused and still stunned. The young woman says her name is Belle and asks, relieved, how he is feeling now. He tries to stand up but feels a sharp pain and the girl asks him not to strain himself. With a sweaty face, he asks the young woman how long he was unconscious. Belle then reveals that 2 days have passed since the exam and asks if he remembers. With a serious look, the young man says the word exam to himself with a worried tone. In his mind, several scenes from the fight against the giant creature begin to flash by rapidly. With a focused gaze, he confirms to the girl that he remembers everything that happened. He then falls silent for a moment, looking serious and thoughtful at the examination. The young man then asks Belle what happened to the undead used in the exam. The girl is surprised by the question and repeats his words in a confused tone. She explains that his brothers who passed by are on the property with their undead. With that, the young man remembers his rival and the undead woman who accompanied him in the race. He then asks if his rival managed to return to the property safely. Belle confirms that yes and says that including himself, 5 people returned from the exam. The boy is relieved and thinks that luckily he was saved thanks to her this time. He then thinks that as long as Hannah is safe for now, everything is fine, but he hesitates. The young woman says it's difficult to talk about, but only 4 passed and he wasn't one of them. Shocked, the boy turns around and asks what on earth she means by that information. He argues that he protected the zombie and defeated the beast, and asks why he failed. The girl is speechless and doesn't know how to answer the young master's question. The scene then changes to a large mansion where a ceremony is about to take place. The doors of a large hall open, revealing the young people who passed the exam. Several young people in elegant uniforms enter the hall for the awards ceremony. A man then prepares to present the marks of success to those who passed. He congratulates everyone for having successfully passed that year's exam. The man says the test was tough and that 4 passing grades is an excellent result. One of the young men then thanks the man with a smirk and a mocking look. With a confident smile, the boy says it was a piece of cake and that he wished he had killed more. Another young man with green hair stares at him with a serious and utterly disapproving look. With this, the man announces that everyone will receive 3 days of special leave as a reward. The young people celebrate the news with smirks and arrogant looks. After the ceremony, the young people leave the hall celebrating their victory in the difficult exam. The man then peeks through the door with a mysterious look and a smirk on his face. With a wicked grin, the blonde boy pats one of his brothers on the shoulder. He says he heard that the blonde guy managed to defeat an A-rank beast during the exam. The boy is startled but disguises it and says that yes, that's more or less what happened. The young man with green hair says he has never heard of such a beast in an exam. He continues and asks where he got so much strength to protect the boy without mana. With a smirk, the boy says he won't reveal his secrets to a rival. The young man with green hair is speechless at his older brother's response. He then says that he doesn't care about that and that he will find out the truth for himself. The blonde boy simply says goodbye and walks away with a serious and determined look on his face. In his thoughts, he says with a wry smile that he doubts he doesn't care. A memory of the end of the fight returns to his mind with the image of his rival on the ground. The blonde youth looks at the unconscious boy and calls him by name with a concerned tone. He approaches the body and asks if he is still alive after the intense struggle. With his two undead companions, the young man faces his fallen rival and seems to have a plan in mind. With a look of pure malice, he stares at the boy and seems ready to act. With a smirk and a sweaty face, he seems to be plotting something quite wicked. Suddenly, he cuts off the protagonist's undead head with his sword in one swift motion. The zombie's head flies through the air and dissolves into a sinister black smoke in the process. With the sword stuck in the ground, the chain that bound the creature breaks into pieces. He then mocks his rival and says that he lost because he fainted in a pathetic way. With that, he carries the unconscious boy and claims that he was the one who defeated the beast. With a wry smile, he says that it was he who protected the young man from the beast and saved him. He then celebrates his victory and says that his rival got what he deserved for being weak. From afar, Lord Gilgren observes the scene with the young people in the courtyard of the great mansion. Beside him, the servant observes him with a serious look, somewhat worried about the situation. The man with glasses then asks if he is sure that everything is all right. He reveals that it wasn't the blonde boy who defeated the beast, and that the crystal detected everything. With this, the man explains that the broken crystal detected the mana that was released. He states that the mana undoubtedly belonged to the protagonist and asks what he plans. But Gilgren only gives a wry smile with a sinister and mysterious look on his face. The servant then sighs and seems resigned to his master's decision there. He then apologizes for his impertinence and walks away, leaving the lord alone. With a wry smile, Gilgren seems very pleased with the result of the examination. He thinks that one of his children has become very interesting to observe. Back in the courtyard, the blonde boy is standing in front of a water fountain, celebrating. With a wry smile, he says that if he shows the medal, his mother will be thrilled. He thinks his rival will be angry, but that he can deal with it later. He celebrates his victory and says that his rival was only lucky to have killed a beast once. Suddenly, his mother calls him, and the boy turns to her with a surprised look. With a smile on his face, he shouts his mother's name with great happiness in his voice. He then runs towards her and shouts that he succeeded and that he passed the exam successfully. With tears in his eyes, he says that he has finally brought glory to their home. But suddenly, his mother hits him with a hard slap across the face that throws him far away. The boy falls to the ground, shocked and bewildered by what has just happened in front of him. With the blow, he is thrown into the water fountain and becomes completely soaked and confused. He stares at his mother with a look of pure confusion and can't believe what he's seeing. The boy tries to stand up and leans on the edge of the fountain to face his mother. Sitting in the water, he wonders what the hell that was and why she attacked him. With water streaming down his face, he stares at his mother with a look of pure disbelief. Suddenly, a voice calls him, and he sees the protagonist standing in front of him with a cold look. With a smirk, the young man calls him older brother in a mocking tone. The blonde boy is speechless and his face pale with fear when he sees his rival there. He tries to explain himself but can't find the right words for the situation. Elsewhere, some young people are wondering if that is really the protagonist at the fountain. Sitting by the fountain, the young man says it seems he failed the exam. He concludes by saying that it was a real shame even after defeating the A-rank beast. The blonde boy stares at him with a look of pure hatred and contempt for his cold attitude. With a sweaty face and clenched teeth, he can't believe what he's hearing. The protagonist then asks if he didn't take everything he did and claim it was him. With a furious look, he threatens his rival and says that the fountain could become his grave. Desperate, the young man says he doesn't know what he's talking about and not to blame him. With a face full of anger, he demands proof and says that his rival has no way to prove anything. But before he can finish the sentence, the protagonist hits him with a strong punch. The other young people who are watching the scene are thrown backward by the force of the blow. The boy screams in pain, his head throbbing from the punch he just received. The protagonist stares coldly at his rival and says that he understands the situation now. With a wry smile, he says that if his rival had any remorse, he would let him live. The blonde boy becomes desperate and begins to stammer, not knowing what to do or say. Suddenly, young Belle begs the master to calm down and not do anything foolish. She shouts that he cannot kill him because in that house killing one of their own is forbidden. With a smirk, the rival agrees with the young woman and stares at him with a challenging look. He then says that he passed the exam and that he has the medal to prove his victory. With that, he calls him worthless trash without a medal and says that he can't fight without it being a duel. The protagonist then asks if he can kill him without any problems in an official duel. The rival is shocked and speechless by the young man's direct and frightening question. Desperate, he says that's not what he meant, but the boy interrupts him. The young man then challenges him to a duel for the medal with a look full of hatred. The rival tries to refuse, saying he's tired, but the young man doesn't seem to care. Suddenly, the boy's mother yells at him to accept the challenge and show his strength. She reminds him that he defeated a beast and passed the exam and that this is nothing. Desperate, the young man tries to explain the truth to his mother but is interrupted. The protagonist grabs him by the face and stares at him with his red eyes gleaming. With his hand full of water, the boy begs his rival to stop, but he doesn't listen. He then asks if his rival will duel and that it should be easy for him. The blonde youth stammers and says that he will not duel with him at that moment under any circumstances. With a look full of fury, the protagonist seems to have reached his limit of patience. He then begins to drown his rival in the fountain with all his might and without mercy. The boy struggles in the water trying to free himself, but the young man is much stronger. The boy's mother screams desperately for him to get up and fight like a real man. From a distance, the other young men watch the scene, and one of them says that the rival is going to do it. Young Belle calls out to the master, her gaze worried about the situation at the fountain. With a face full of rage, the protagonist seems ready to end it all. In his thoughts, he tells himself that he knows what he needs to do at that moment. The image of the hero Chronogeus returns to his mind with a serious and determined look. A voice in his head says that this is not something the Sword Saint should do. He then remembers Lord Gilgren and thinks that he cannot defeat him at the moment. The young man knows he needs to get closer to him and that he can't miss the chance to get better. With that, he gets up and asks his rival if he will duel with him or not. With his foot on his face, he asks if he prefers to duel or die right there at the fountain. With a determined look in his eyes, the protagonist seems to have accepted the challenge of the duel. With his eye bleeding, the young man seems to have reached a new and dangerous conclusion. Suddenly, a mysterious figure appears and interrupts the fight between the two brothers at the fountain. The young man with green hair stares at the protagonist with a serious look, his sword in hand. In a firm and decisive tone, he tells the protagonist that enough is enough of this fighting. The young man turns around and faces the newcomer with a look of surprise and distrust. He thinks he didn't sense him approaching and that he appeared out of nowhere right there in front of him. With a serious look, the protagonist seems to recognize the young man from somewhere familiar. Irritated, the boy shouts his brother's name with a tone of pure anger and frustration. The young man with green hair stares at him with a serious look and seems confused by the scene. He then asks what he is planning and if he is not there to kill anyone. The boy replies that it's not that easy and that he has something to ask him. With a serious look, he asks if it was the protagonist who killed the beast in the exam. The young man looks at him with a sly smile and asks what he gets if he answers. With that, the green-haired boy says that he imagined that would be the answer. He then says that the truth doesn't matter because there's no way that useless person could have done that. The young man with green hair holds a golden medal with a serious and determined look. He says that he also passed the exam and that he will accept the challenge in his brother's place. Suddenly, a green aura envelops the young man, and he prepares for the battle that is approaching. The protagonist is surprised by his brother's attitude and stares at him with a shocked look. With a challenging look, he challenges him to a duel and says that the exam has left him rusty. With a wry smile, the protagonist says that now things are really getting good. The rival then warns him, saying that Helios is on another level and that he cannot beat him. But the boy ignores him and says he doesn't care whose medal he gets. With a confident look, he seems ready to face any challenge that comes his way. A blue aura surrounds the young man, and he prepares to fight with everything he has now. With a wry smile, he says he was bored of only fighting small fish. The two face each other, their auras glowing, as they prepare for the duel that is about to begin. With their auras activated, the two face each other, and the young man with green hair challenges him to a duel. With a serious look, he says that he hopes the protagonist will amuse him at least a little. The boy then gives a wry smile and says that things are getting interesting now. The two position themselves facing each other, ready for the start of the great duel. But suddenly, a female voice shouts for the two young men to stop this right now. Young Belle appears with a serious and determined look, intent on stopping the fight between the two. The protagonist then faces her and tells her not to interfere because it's none of her business. She explains that a fight between siblings is allowed, but an official duel has its own rules. The young man with green hair stares at her with a serious look and seems to be thoughtful about it. The boy then complains and says that he doesn't care about the rules and wants to fight right there. But her brother agrees with the young woman and says that if they break the rules, they will both be expelled. Irritated, the protagonist says that this is stupid and that Gilgren is a pain in the ass. Suddenly, the young man with green hair stares at him, his expression shocked by what he has just heard. He becomes furious that the protagonist called his father by his first name without any respect. With a look of pure hatred, he says that his rival deserves to die 10,000 times for his offense. But the boy just stares at him with a wry smile and doesn't seem to care about the threat. The scene then changes to a torch burning in a dark and mysterious place. With this, the sign reveals that they are in the bloodstained courtyard, a dark place. The two young men then position themselves in a battle arena for the official duel at last. The young man with green hair prepares for the fight, his green aura completely enveloping him. The protagonist then walks towards her with Belle watching him from afar, worried. With a serious look on his face, the young man seems ready for the challenge that awaits him. He and Belle then observe the place, which is decorated with giant, frightening skulls. The boy then questions what an official venue is and says that it's just a filthy arena. Worried, the young woman asks her master not to overexert himself in that dangerous fight. She says that Helios is one of the strongest brothers and that he kills everyone who confronts him without mercy. His talent was recognized so early that he was already going on missions at just 8 years old. With a wry smile, the protagonist says that this seems very amusing to him. The young woman then alerts him and says there is one more thing he needs to know about his rival. In the Helios mansion, he is known as the Reaper of the White Rose for his skill with the sword. With tears in her eyes, she begs the master to be very careful in the duel. But the boy scoffs and says he doesn't care if the rose is white or black because he'll crush it anyway. Suddenly, a loud noise echoes through the arena and a mechanism begins to activate there. The walls of the place begin to move, revealing a deadly trap with spikes. The protagonist stares at the scene with a look of surprise and wonders what it is. The walls close in and are now covered in sharp thorns with impaled skulls. The place transforms into a cage of thorns, and the two young people are trapped inside. With a wry smile, he says that the arena is a bit oversized for a duel. He then stretches and tells his brother that they can start fighting at any time. The young man with green hair stares at him, his aura completely enveloping him, and prepares himself. With a hateful look, he says that his rival doesn't know his place and asks if he's ready. The protagonist taunts him and says that if he loses, he'll call him a white idiot forever. With eyes gleaming with rage, the rival says he will silence the boy forever now. From afar, other young people observe the scene from the stands with looks of pure curiosity. One of them wonders what the boy is thinking, because if he loses, he will be kicked out of the house. Another blond young man observes the scene with a serious look and seems to be thoughtful about it. Several people are in the stands to watch the duel between the two brothers there. Suddenly, Lord Gilgren appears on the scene with a serious and imposing look on his face. The young man with green hair is shocked to see his father there and stammers his name aloud. The other young men kneel and seem to be afraid of the Lord's presence there. The servant then appears and in a firm voice orders everyone present to be silent. With a cold look, the protagonist thinks that Lord Gilgren has finally appeared there. With that, all the young men in the stands kneel down, afraid of the Lord's presence. The young man with green hair also kneels in the arena with a look of pure respect. With a sly smile, Gilgren tells the two of them to show him what they can do. The protagonist believes that this duel is merely a step towards achieving his true goal. With a determined look in his eyes, he vows to himself that he will discover his secret. The servant then asks his master to ring the bell to begin the entertainment. With that, Gilgren uses his magic and tells the two to enjoy the duel to the fullest. A small purple flame appears in the middle of the battle arena between the two young brothers. With magic, the flame transforms into a wine goblet with a purple liquid inside. The two young men face the trophy in the middle of the arena and seem to understand the signal to begin. With a sly smile, the protagonist prepares for the start of the long-awaited duel. His brother also gives a slight smile, his green aura completely enveloping him. Suddenly, the cup shatters into pieces, and the duel between the two brothers finally begins. The young man with green hair focuses his gaze and prepares for the first attack of the fight. With its aura of thorns, it advances at high speed towards its opponent. Thorny vines entwine his sword, and he prepares for a decisive blow. He then leaps and delivers a powerful blow towards the protagonist with all his might. But the boy blocks the attack and says that his brother seems to be very impatient. He then pushes him away and asks if he's trying to show off to daddy. The young man with green hair leaps into the air and prepares an aerial attack with his green vines. With a downward strike, he attempts to hit the protagonist with all his might. With a wry smile, the boy thinks that his rival didn't hesitate to counterattack. He then unleashes a wave of green energy with his sword towards his rival. With a focused gaze, the young man with green hair seems very confident of victory. But the protagonist blocks the attack with his sword, and the two face off closely. With a smirk, he asks if his rival is so fond of necks. The dust settles and the young people in the stands can't believe what they see. One of them wonders if that is really the protagonist they knew before. In a flashback, a young blonde man appears fighting against a rival with a yellow aura. With a serious look, the young man with green hair says that his rival is completely wrong. With his eyes blazing with rage, he says he just wants to cut his talking mouth off. The audience is shocked to see the yellow aura and they realize it's level 4 mana. The two face off again in an exchange of quick, powerful blows there. The young man with green hair seems to be getting the upper hand with his powerful attacks. With a leap, he dodges an attack and prepares for an aerial counterattack. The protagonist dodges a wave of energy and appears to be in trouble in the fight. He then uses his hand to block a burst of energy coming towards him. With that, the young man with green hair launches several bursts of energy from above. The protagonist faces the attack coming towards him and prepares to defend himself. He prepares to block the waves of energy surrounding him on all sides. With his sword, he is able to defend himself from attacks and avoid being hit by them. After the series of blows, he kneels with his sword stuck in the ground, panting. He then faces the wall of thorns and seems to be thinking of a plan of action. In his thoughts, he analyzes his rival and says that his mana control is very good. With a wry smile, he thinks that the rival's tactic isn't bad, but there's a catch. Suddenly, an aura of fire and lightning envelops the protagonist, surprising everyone present. The young man with green hair stares at him with a look of pure shock and cannot believe what he is seeing. In the stands, the other young people are speechless at the protagonist's power. With a smile, he asks if that fighting style will work against another level 4. His brother stares at him, shocked and speechless at the new aura he has suddenly revealed. With a smirk, he calls him the bastard of the White Rose and challenges him to a fight. The arena is illuminated by the auras of the two young people as the audience watches from above. With a furious look, the young man with green hair can't believe what he's seeing there. He then wonders if his rival's style would work against someone of the same mana level. With his sword in hand, he challenges him to battle with a look full of confidence on his face. The young people in the stands scream in shock when they realize that this is level 4 mana. One of the young men says that Helios was already strong, but that the protagonist is also powerful. From afar, Lord Gilgren observes the two auras of his sons shining in the arena. With a smirk on his face, the Lord seems very interested in the duel. But then he thinks that this is not right and seems to have realized something important. With a sinister look, he wants the boy to reveal the power he's hiding there. The young man with green hair is speechless, and his aura of thorns completely envelops him. Angrily, he wonders how the protagonist managed to reach level 4 mana. He then asks if his rival also received Lord Gilgren's blessing in some way. The protagonist stares at him confused and wonders what on earth this so-called blessing is. He then mocks them and asks if their father prayed for him to become stronger. His brother doesn't answer and just stares at him with a serious and determined look. With that, he grips his sword tightly and prepares to attack again. He shouts that he will not accept that and that he will not lose to his brother under any circumstances. With a look full of fury, he declares that the only one chosen by his father is himself. Suddenly, a huge amount of green vines explodes from his body with full power. He then creates a giant sword of thorns and points it at his rival in the arena. With a smirk, the boy scoffs and says that those tentacles are disgusting. With a face full of hatred, the young man with green hair shouts for his rival to die right there. He then attacks with his vine sword with all the strength he possesses at the moment. The protagonist faces the massive attack coming towards him and appears to be in trouble. But he moves at high speed and begins to cut the vines with his sharp sword. From afar, young Belle cries out her master's name with despair in her loud voice. With that, the boy runs across the vine sword and destroys it to pieces in the process. He thinks the opponent's attack is accurate and alters the form of the mana without wasting any. In contrast, its mana leaks and consumption is intense, which is a major disadvantage. He can't use his special fencing there and knows it's not the time to have fun. With a leap, he prepares for a powerful counterattack with his yellow aura. He then thinks that despite everything, the technique he's going to use is quite risky. He then uses the hound's cage to try to imitate what he saw before. His brother mocks him and says that his movements are too slow for him to dodge. But he is shocked to see that his previous momentum has suddenly vanished out of nowhere. The young man with green hair then charges full force at his opponent. Suddenly, the protagonist is surprised by something and his eyes widen in shock. With that, he is thrown back by the force of a powerful and unexpected attack. The blow hits him squarely and throws him far away with a very strong impact on his body. With an irritated look, the boy seemed not to have liked what happened at all. In the stands, Lord Gilgren observes the scene with a serious and thoughtful look. His eyes analyze each movement of the two young men in the arena with great attention. Trapped in his rival's technique, the young man with green hair desperately calls out for his father. With a sweaty face and wide eyes, he seems very afraid of the attack. Suddenly, he notices something and his eyes fill with pure terror and despair. He shouts that he will not give his father's affection to someone like the protagonist. Angrily, the boy asks how he can like their father so much. Your brother unleashes an absurd amount of power, creating thorny vines all over the arena. With a look full of hatred, he stares at his rival and says that this will be the end of everything for him. At that moment, the young man with green hair advances with his massive attack towards his opponent. From above, he unleashes his blow, and the two prepare for an immense clash of powers. The protagonist stares back at him, his red eyes gleaming with pure determination. He then remembers his father and how he was always straightforward in his battles back then. In a flashback, Lord Gilgren is shown fighting with his sword against several enemies. The boy thinks he's always done things that way and that he's not going to change now. He doesn't need to think about details as long as his power pierces through his opponent. Suddenly, his brother is shocked by something and can't believe what he's seeing. With his aura of fire and lightning, the protagonist is able to defend himself from the vine attack. The young man with green hair is then pushed away by the force of the counterattack. He screams in despair and asks what the hell that technique he just used is. In the stands, the young people look up and wonder what is happening there. Young Belle cries out her master's name with an expression of pure terror on her face. From afar, Lord Gilgren watches the smoke rising from the arena with a serious look. He then just grumbles and doesn't seem very impressed with the scene he saw. The protagonist's aura of fire and lightning begins to take on a different shape. With that, his hand grips the handle of the new weapon he created with his own mana. He then stomps hard on the ground and the aura around his feet intensifies even further. In his new form, the protagonist reveals himself with a giant aura in the shape of an axe. The young people in the stands wonder in shock what kind of shape he has created. His brother is speechless and his eyes wide with pure shock at the scene. The protagonist then calls him a white rose and tells him to grind his teeth now. The two auras face each other in the arena, and the giant fire axe illuminates the place. The young man with green hair shouts and asks what the hell that technique he used was. With a smirk, the boy repeats, so that the white rose grinds its teeth. He then says that he will pluck out each of his thorns without leaving a single one behind. His brother stares at him frightened and seems afraid of the power that now surrounds him. With that, the protagonist swings his aura axe at his rival with all his might. The young man with green hair is startled by the attack and doesn't know how to react to it. He then delivers the blow with all his might from above downwards across the arena. The axe of fire and lightning descends with full force, and a huge explosion is about to happen. Suddenly, a huge explosion of golden light engulfs the entire battle arena. The young people in the stands scream in pain as they are hit by the shockwave. One of them asks if that is really the protagonist they knew, the one with so much power. Young Belle stares at the scene in shock and can't even utter a word. Amidst the flames, the boy stands firm, his power enveloping him completely. Suddenly, his brother's feet touch the ground and he seems to have survived the attack. Amidst the dust, the young man with green hair stares at his rival with a look of pure hatred. He accuses him of copying his technique and says that his mana modeling is terrible. The boy scoffs and says that he is the hunter and that his brother is just a weed. The young man with green hair stares at him through clenched teeth, pure rage at the insult. He then repeats the word weed with a look of pure hatred on his face. He then challenges him and tells him to test it and see if it really is a weed. With this, he releases a massive amount of green vines in the direction of his rival. The protagonist faces the attack with his red eyes glowing intensely. He then begins to dodge the vines with impressive agility and speed. His brother gets angry when he sees that he can't hit him and curses angrily. The boy scoffs and says that weeds are hard to kill and always grow back. That is why he says he will uproot his brother with a powerful and final attack. But the young man with green hair manages to defend himself at the last second with his vines. With the dust settling, the rival floats in the air while the protagonist stares at him from below. Furious, he complains and says that his rival's sword style is crude and low class. He then stares at his opponent with a look of disdain and seems to be pondering something. Suddenly, the young man looks towards the stands and sees his father watching everything from afar. Lord Gilgren gazes at the scene with a serious and imposing expression on his face. He seems to be analyzing every detail of the fight with a very focused gaze on both of them. But in his eyes, the protagonist's reflection shows who he is paying attention to. His son notices this and with wide eyes stammers his father's name in shock. Suddenly, he feels alone in the arena when he sees his father only looking at his rival. With a terrified expression, he wonders if his father is really looking at the sheik. With tears in his eyes, he thinks he's being thrown away in exchange for the protagonist. In his tears, the reflection of his father looking at his rival fills him with pure despair. With tears streaming down his face, he clenches his teeth and says he won't allow it. He shouts that the special place in his father's heart belongs only to himself. He says that only he deserves to be loved and needed by his father at that moment. Suddenly his eyes turn black and he shouts that this place is his alone. The protagonist is shocked by his brother's sudden change and is frightened. A strange, purple goo begins to ooze from the chest of the young man with green hair. The boy stares at the scene terrified and wonders what on earth he is seeing. His brother says that he is the only one allowed to merge with Lord Gilgren now. He then transforms into a muscular form with purple markings all over his body. The protagonist gives a wry smile and understands that this is the Lord's blessing. With the transformation complete, the young man with green hair shouts his father's name in fury. He then screams in pain and clenches his hand tightly during the agonizing transformation. With his face contorted in pain, he screams as the vines completely envelop him. The vines squeeze his hand and arm tightly, and he seems to be suffering greatly. With a look of pure hatred, he faces his rival and vows to finish him off right there. He then charges forward in his new form, filled with hatred, towards the protagonist. The two face each other closely in a clash of auras and powers that echoes through the arena. With a cry of fury, the young man with green hair seems to be completely out of his mind. The protagonist then tells Helios to pull himself together and start all over again calmly. With that, the young man with green hair is hit squarely and appears to be badly wounded in the chest. Young Bell and the others in the stands are shocked by the scene they have just witnessed. He then tells his brother to clean himself up and return to the duel when he is ready. Helios is thrown far away by the force of the blow, and the protagonist remains firm in the arena. The young people in the stands don't believe it and wonder if he really beat Helios. One of the blonde youths is speechless and stares at the scene with a look of pure shock on his face. From afar, Lord Gilgren observes the destroyed arena with his defeated son lying on the ground. The Lord stares at the scene with a serious look, his red eyes gleaming intensely. He then turns to leave, and the servant thanks him for his hard work in the fight. Without saying anything, the Lord simply turns and begins to walk away from the stands. With a sideways glance, he seems to be pondering the outcome of the duel he witnessed. The protagonist is then left alone in the arena and faces the spot where his father stood before. With a determined look, he stares at the top of the stands without blinking. He then vows to himself that one day he will finish off Gilgren with his own hands. From afar, the Lord gives a wry smile and seems to have heard his son's thoughts. With that, he finally leaves and abandons the battle arena without looking back. The scene then changes and a large, elegant door slams shut with a very loud bang. After the fight, the protagonist walks back to the mansion with firm, slow steps. He approaches his brother, who's still lying wounded on the ground of the battle arena. With that, the boy kneels beside his brother and looks like he's about to do something. He then picks up a small piece of his brother's body with a serious look. He says that as promised he will take the proof of passage and bids farewell to his brother on the ground. With his face smeared with dirt, the young man calls out his father's name in a weak, sad voice. The boy stares at his defeated rival on the ground and seems unconcerned by his suffering. He turns around and tells his brother to live his own life from now on without their father. Suddenly, the Lord's servant appears in a flash of purple light and stares at the protagonist. He congratulates the young man on his assignment to the lower division of the mansion now. The man says he will inform him about the future later and asks him to rest for today. With an angry look, the boy grumbles and tells the servant to mind his own business. But suddenly he feels something strange in his body, and his eyes widen in surprise. With that, the boy falls to his knees on the ground and seems to be in a great deal of pain. He thinks this is a side effect of consuming mana and that he can't avoid it. The servant then simply observes the scene in silence and seems unsurprised by it. Even in pain, the young man tries to get up and leans on his sword to remain standing there. Through clenched teeth, he curses softly and seems very irritated by the situation. But suddenly, young Bell appears and catches him before he collapses to the ground from weakness. Surprised, the boy looks up and calls the young woman's name in a somewhat weak voice. With a smile on her face, she thanks him for his hard work and for winning the fight. With a sweaty face, the young man stares at the girl and seems to be a little emotional about her. With that, he finally closes his eyes and faints from exhaustion in the arms of young Bell. The scene then changes to a tall tower on a dark, rainy night outside. The sign reveals that 3 days have passed since the duel, and we see an empty corridor. The protagonist is in a library reading a book near the window while it rains. He closes another book and thinks he hasn't found anything useful in it either. The young man thinks he searched all the mansion's libraries but found nothing. He still can't find a clue about the secret behind Gilgren's power. He feels he has reached the starting line but still can't take the first step. With his gaze focused, he thinks there must be some kind of clue somewhere. Suddenly 3 young men appear and call him lonely for reading alone in that place. The boy then looks up from the book and stares at them with an irritated expression. Irritated, the boy asks what the idiots want, and the young man with the man bun taunts him with a smile. He complains that it's 3 against 1 and that family is always the same way. The rival smiles and says that if they beat the guy who defeated Helios, their reputation will rise. With that, the 3 release their auras, and the group leader shouts for his rival to die quickly. With a war cry, the young man with the man bun and his friends charge toward him. But in the blink of an eye, the protagonist lands an elbow strike to the leader's stomach. With that, he also hits the second young man with a quick blow, leaving him breathless on the spot. The third young man is hit squarely and falls to the ground unconscious with his tongue hanging out. Fallen on the table, the 3 young men were defeated, and the boy says that they are merely weak. He then turns his back and says that sort of boring stuff is not for him at all. With a serious look, he decides that he will face his problems head-on. He then tells the young men to clean everything up and that he will leave them in peace for now. Frightened, they stammer and call the young master by name, afraid of the threat he made. Suddenly, young Belle appears and says she was looking for him all over the place. She gets angry at what he said, and the boy apologizes, saying he spoke without thinking. But the young woman says that Lord Gilgren is calling him and that he has something to say to him. With a surprised look, the protagonist seems unable to believe what he has just heard from the young woman. He thinks that his father finally called him and that it took longer than he expected. With a determined look in his eyes, he accepts the call and prepares for the meeting. The protagonist then approaches a large door and appears ready to enter. He thinks he is finally getting closer to his father and to his great goal there. Other young people walk down a chic hallway and seem to be going to the same place. The boy stares at the other young people walking down the hallway with looks of superiority. Suddenly, one of the blonde youths stares at him and calls his name with a surprised expression. Another young man laughs and teases him for being late again, but the boy just ignores him. The blonde youth then gets angry and calls him a dark bastard for ignoring him there. The protagonist merely glances sideways at him and seems unconcerned by his provocations. With his sword in hand, the young blonde man faces the protagonist with a serious and challenging look. The boy then ignores him and continues down the hallway toward his destination. The young blonde man stares at him from afar and seems to be analyzing his rival's every move. In his thoughts, the protagonist says to himself that guy is very strange. He is certain that there is something wrong with that young man and that he needs to keep an eye on him. From afar, the young blonde man gives a sly smile and seems to be plotting something. The protagonist simply stares at him in silence and seems to be pondering what to do. He then arrives at his destination, and the servant guides him to the presence of Lord Gilgren there. The lord is seated on his throne, and the servant thanks him for his efforts in the duel. Gilgren simply agrees, and the servant says that he is now part of the lower division. With a wry smile, the boy hears that the Lord has a direct order for him now. The servant then says that his mission is to defend the frozen lands for 6 months. Shocked, the boy can't believe what he heard and stammers, unable to understand the order. He asks if the lower division shouldn't serve alongside his father in the mansion. The servant explains that this is not always the case, and that the mission is still very important to the Lord. Irritated, the boy grumbles, and his dark aura begins to emanate angrily from his body. In his thoughts, he cries out that this is exile and that it makes no sense to him. The servant then reveals that a ritual will be performed to increase Gilgren's power. The protagonist is surprised and wonders what kind of ritual is about to take place. The man explains that the Lord will not appear on the front lines for 6 months. The boy's mission is to eliminate the magical beasts and dangers before the ritual begins. With a serious look, the protagonist silently ponders the mission he has been given there. He then decides to simplify things and faces his father with a determined look. He then promises that he will place it in a place even closer to him when he returns. With a serious look and a wry smile, the Lord asks his son what he thinks of the proposal. The boy is surprised by the offer and wonders if it means getting closer to him. The servant informs him that the middle division has already arrived at the location and asks him to cooperate. The protagonist thinks he doesn't know what his father wants, but that it's not a bad deal for him. With a clenched fist, he kneels forcefully on the ground with an expression of determination. He then accepts the mission and vows to himself that he will make his father regret his words. The scene then changes to a horse's hoof walking through the snow on a cold, dark day. A carriage pulled by 2 black horses travels along a snow-covered dirt road. The coachman says he can only take them this far and that the rest of the journey is up to them now. Suddenly, someone jumps out of the carriage and shouts in surprise at the scene outside. Young Belle appears wearing warm clothes and complains that it is very cold in that place. Irritated, the boy asks why she came along and says he could have done everything alone. She calls him cruel and says that her duty is to serve him until the end of everything that happens. The coachman bids farewell and informs them that the ruins of Vistoria are just ahead of the location. He also warns them to be careful of the bad weather, and the young woman thanks him for his help. The girl is amazed by the snowy landscape and says it's the first time she's seen anything like it. But the protagonist ignores her and with a serious look, stares at the ruins of Vistoria in the distance. The young woman bids farewell to the coachman and calls her master so they can continue their journey. The two then walk through the snow towards their destination with the snow falling heavily. The protagonist covers his face to protect himself from the cold and continues his walk in the snow. From afar, young Belle watches him and seems to be having difficulty keeping up with him in the cold. He then turns around and asks what happened to all the energy she had before. She apologizes and says she didn't imagine it would be so difficult to walk in that cold. With a serious look, the boy says that's enough for today and that they're going to stop to rest. They then light a fire in a cave to warm themselves from the cold night. The young woman warms herself by the fire and says she feels her life slowly returning to her. The boy reprimands her, saying that she is underestimating nature and that a mistake could be fatal. She then asks if it's his first time in snowy mountains and he lies to her. He opens the young woman's backpack and asks if all that stuff inside is just her clothes. He then throws her a coat and says he packed it so she wouldn't catch a cold. The boy tells her to bundle up and go to sleep because they're leaving very early the next day. With a flushed face, the young woman thanks him in a timid voice and prepares to sleep. In the distance, the bonfire illuminates the snow, and the two young people rest in the cave for the time being. The young woman then falls asleep near the fire wearing the coat that the master gave her to keep warm. The protagonist keeps watch while she sleeps and silently observes her near the fire. With a serious look, he seems to be thoughtful about the mission and what awaits them in the future. He thinks the young woman doesn't know that the place is full of beasts and that the Gruzik tribe is there. The Gruzik tribe is a warlike band that lives in the frozen lands of that region. They deal in illegal weapons and kidnap women and children without any mercy. In a memory, the boy recalls the grotesque masks they used to wear. He understands that the mission is to eliminate beasts and threats like that dangerous tribe. With a determined look in his eyes, he seems ready for the challenge that awaits him. Suddenly, he notices something outside the cave and gets up to investigate. A bright light approaches the cave, and the boy becomes alert to the situation. The light transforms into an arrow of energy and comes towards you at great speed. The protagonist dodges at the last second and the arrow grazes his face. The arrow lodges in the cave wall, and the boy stares at the attack with a serious look. He notices that the arrow is enveloped in mana and understands that it is not a beast out there. Suddenly, several arrows of light appear at the entrance of the cave and completely surround him. Arrows rain down on the protagonist, and he prepares to defend himself from the enemy attack. With a leap, he manages to dodge all the arrows and advances towards the archers. Two men run through the snow as an energy arrow lodges itself in the ground near them. The boy realizes that they have a disciplined background and that they are an experienced group. From afar, several archers prepare to shoot once more in the protagonist's direction. With a smirk, the boy prepares for the counterattack, sword in hand. He then uses his mana to create a shockwave that hits all enemies at once. The boy then points his sword at the neck of one of the men and immobilizes him on the ground. The man surrenders and asks the boy not to hurt him as he surrenders in the fight. With a serious look, the boy realizes that they are not wearing masks and that they are not from the tribe. He then stares at the man with a suspicious look and seems not to believe his words. The man then smiles and shows an emblem on his chest with a slight grin on his face. He says they are his comrades from the same unit and that it was just a joke. Surprised and annoyed, the boy asks what the hell he said with a furious look. Suddenly, a mysterious voice praises him and says that he seems to have some skill. A woman on horseback appears and apologizes for the rude reception from her men. She introduces herself as Perrier and welcomes him to her unit as a disposable pawn. Confused by the situation, the young man repeats the question that was asked of him with a look of disdain. Then the woman in armor asks his name and calls him a pawn who shouldn't walk with his head held high. With a wry smile, he responds to the provocation and says that she's being quite hypocritical now. Perrier says his younger brother lost to someone like him, and the boy wonders who that could be. At this point, she reveals herself to be Helios's older sister, and that she already knew everything about their duel. The boy gives a wry smile and asks if she is there to avenge her defeated brother. But she says that the weak are a sin, and that justice belongs only to those who are victorious in the struggle. With a sideways glance, he merely grumbles and seems not to care about her words. Back in the cave, young Belle wakes up confused by the noise and looks around to understand. She is startled to see two hooded men in front of her, and they comment that she has woken up. The girl panics and screams, asking who they are, and the man tells her that she is there. The commander says that he brought a maid, and the boy replies that she followed him on her own accord. Shocked, the young woman stares at Perrier and asks what the commander of the Middle Division is doing there. The scene changes and everyone is walking in the snow, and the girl asks what happened last night. He says it was nothing and that the commander only came to pick them up for the mission. The young woman then remarks that it seems colder and asks if Perrier doesn't feel the same way she does. With a serious look, the commander stares at the path ahead and seems to ignore the young woman's question. The protagonist also becomes alert and stares at the horizon with an expression of distrust. Suddenly, the snow-covered ground begins to crack, and everyone is surprised by the sudden tremor. The fissure opens rapidly, and the snow-covered ground breaks apart beneath everyone's feet. Frightened, the young woman shouts that there is a crack in the ground, and the boy prepares for danger. With that, a huge hole opens up, and something gigantic begins to emerge from the depths of the earth. A giant snake with purple eyes emerges from the snow and stares at the group with a hungry look. The young man grumbles that they are already magical beasts, and the girl screams in fear at the scene she sees. With a wry smile, the commander says that this is perfect for the current situation. She then says that he defeated her brother, and that now she wants to see how good he really is at fighting. Irritated, the boy asks why on earth he would have to do anything for her now. She says she is his superior officer and that if he refuses, he will be sent back home. The giant snake charges forward, and the boy grumbles that it's getting too cocky. The monster attacks forcefully and smashes the snow-covered ground with its head in a powerful blow. With a quick leap, the young man manages to dodge the attack at the last second and retreats away. With a determined look, he says that everything is fine and asks her to watch carefully. The giant serpent rises and faces the soldiers who scatter to avoid the attack. The boy then runs towards a snowdrift and prepares for the counterattack. He leaps towards the giant serpent, which turns to face him with an angry look. With a wry smile, he faces the monster and seems confident of his victory. From afar, the commander taunts him and asks if he's just going to dodge all the attacks. Irritated, the boy shouts that she is noisy and asks her to shut up and watch. He stares into the open mouth of the serpent and prepares to attack with his sword in hand. The boy then delivers a powerful blow to the monster's scales with his sword in hand. With a focused gaze, he seems to have a plan in mind to defeat the giant beast. But he notices something strange, and his attack seems to have had no effect on the creature. The young man's sword fails to pierce the snake's scales, and it remains unharmed. The commander explains that the beast's scales are similar to titanium and retain heat. She says a conventional attack won't work and asks what he's going to do to win. The young man thanks the speaker, and a blue aura begins to emanate intensely from his body. With his red eyes gleaming, he says that in that case he will do it to win. An aura of lightning envelops his body, and he advances toward the serpent with speed. The woman notices that he is focusing his mana on his legs with a high-level technique. With that, she understands that her special spot isn't just for show and smiles slightly. With his body covered in lightning, he advances to attack the giant serpent in the air. The giant serpent roars in pain, and blood spurts from its mouth at the impact of the blow. The commander says it wasn't bad and that he aimed for the beast's weak points on purpose. But she says that's not enough, and the snake lunges to attack the young man. With a shout, the boy attracts the snake's attention and provokes it to attack him again. With its head wounded, the snake stares at the protagonist with a look of pure fury. The young man then throws himself towards the commander, and the snake follows him with speed. Enveloped by lightning, he asks for permission to leave, and the commander seems to understand his plan there. The commander calls him a brat and asks if he's testing her abilities. She then asks the young woman to look after her horse and prepares for the beast's attack. The woman lunges forward toward the approaching snake, which has its mouth open. With her spear in hand, a red aura envelops her body and she prepares to fight. She then delivers a powerful blow to the snake's head and stuns it with the impact. With a wry smile, the boy thanks them for their help, and an electric aura surrounds him. He says he's going to deliver the final blow, and a large blade of energy emerges from his hand. With a war cry, he leaps and charges toward the serpent with his weapon. With its head severed, the giant serpent finally falls dead onto the snowy ground. Young Belle runs anxiously toward her master and calls him by name. She asks if he is all right, and the boy says yes, but that his coat was torn. Suddenly, the commander's spear is pointed at them, and the boy stares at her intently. She says it wasn't bad at all, and that at least he's not a pawn running to his death. With a wry smile, the boy says that she could just admit things once and for all. The commander says her unit is waiting, and that she will use every last drop of it. With a smile, he tells the woman not to complain if he steals all the credit. The scene then changes, and a red-haired man lets out a sigh of relief. A woman questions him and asks what he is doing standing there in the cold. With a serious look, the man seems to be pondering something he noticed in the place. The woman calls him Hannah and says he's acting very strangely. He says the strange thing is that his breath doesn't turn white even in all this cold. She laughs and says it's because they're higher than any mountain in the country. The woman explains that in dry, cold air, breath does not condense easily. He praises her for her knowledge, and she says she has only read a little about the subject. Surprised, he wonders how she knew the books were from his personal office. He says he's a combat expert and that he'll leave the academic part to her. With a smile, she says she's counting on him and calls him the saint of the sword Chronogaias. Back in the present, the group walks through the snow and the atmosphere seems more tense. With a serious look, the protagonist faces the path ahead without saying a word. The commander leads the group on her horse, and the others follow her in silence. The hooded soldiers walk in silence, and the tension grows with each step. Young Belle watches the scene in silence and seems uncomfortable with the atmosphere. She calls her master and comments that everything has suddenly become very quiet in the place. He says they're not on a picnic and there's no need for small talk. She agrees but says the surrounding silence is eerie, as if time has stopped. The young woman also says she feels colder and that her breath now forms white clouds. He explains that it is quiet because the snow absorbs sound and cold because heat escapes. The boy says that despite its beauty, it is a world of death where life itself stops. The young woman agrees that even though the place is so beautiful, it is quite terrifying for her. Curious, she asks her master when he learned all those things. He replies that Hannah was a meteorologist and that she taught him everything. With a sideways glance, the boy falls silent and seems to remember something sad. The young woman repeats the name Hannah, but the boy turns around and says it's nothing, leaving her confused. The commander calls the maid and says she's going to tell her something interesting since she's so eager to talk. With a sideways glance, she then asks if the young woman has ever heard of the Krujik clan. The girl confirms and says that they are a ruthless organization that operates illegally in all nations. The commander agrees and says that those snow-covered mountains are currently their territory. She reveals that they are gathering members and that they are undoubtedly tracking their movements as well. Surprised, the young woman wonders if they also deal in the trafficking of innocent people. But the woman tells her not to worry because their target is not the people in the group. With a serious look, the protagonist stares at the commander and seems suspicious of something. With this, she reveals that their target is a secret treasure, the great sword of Chronogaias. Shocked by the revelation, the protagonist turns around and wonders what the commander just said. She explains that the sword belonged to the Saint of the Sword and that its sister blade is there as well. With a sweaty face, the boy stares at the woman and seems very tense about the information. The young woman then remembers the name Chronogaias and seems to recognize it from somewhere. The commander confirms and says that it is the name of the man whom Lord Gilgren subdued with his power. She mentions that he was the sword saint of the Kulshia Empire and the sage of the Vesperia Kingdom. With a wry smile, she says that the feat of killing the two is still a legend to this day. Suddenly, the boy feels dizzy and groans while holding his water bottle. The commander says that if something like the legendary sword exists, she will definitely want it. With a wicked grin, she vows that she won't let trash like the Krujik clan get their hands on her. With a sideways glance, the protagonist stares at the woman and seems very angry about the situation. The young woman then calls him, and the boy pretends not to notice and drinks some water to calm down there. One of the soldiers says it's impossible to know how strong Chrono was and that he wanted to fight him. Another soldier jokes that coming from the captain, that sounds a bit strange, and the young woman is startled. With a wry smile, the man says that the great sword sleeps where the moonlight shines on the snow. He reveals that they have been there for a year, and that this is the only clue they have found about the weapon. He says it sounds like a fairy tale and bets 20 that the sword doesn't even really exist. The protagonist gazes at the horizon and seems to be pondering the man's words. In his thoughts, he says that a blade identical to his greatsword is in that place. He thinks he felt that way for a few days, and that his power and efficiency are increasing. With a determined look, he says that if the sword is really there, he won't let anyone take it. The scene then changes to the hooves of a horse walking slowly through the falling snow. The commander then stops her horse, and seems to have noticed something strange on the path ahead. The protagonist also stops and with a serious look, gazes suspiciously at the horizon. The other soldiers and the young woman are confused by the sudden stop and look around. Suddenly, a mysterious figure emerges from the snowstorm and stares at the group from afar. The captain asks what the hell this is, and everyone is on alert due to the tense situation. With a wry smile, the commander says that speaking of the devil, he finally appeared there. The figure approaches and reveals a white mask with horns and bright red eyes. The young woman screams in fear and asks if it's a monster as the captain draws his sword. The boy calms her down and throws his coat aside, preparing for the fight to come. With a wry smile, he says it looks like the Krujik clan is putting on a show for them. The masked man stares at them in silence, and an electric aura begins to emanate from his body. Suddenly, several other masked men appear and surround the group from all sides. More masked men appear and the group finds itself completely surrounded by enemies. The commander and the protagonist prepare to fight and face their enemies with seriousness. In the blink of an eye, dozens of enemies surround the group and the battle is about to begin. The boy faces the enemies and says that they are surrounded by the enemy clan's troops. The commander says that they were already planning to hunt them down and that this only saves them the trouble. With a wry smile, the young man says that was an exaggeration, but asks who will be the first to fight. One of the clan members approaches and faces the group with an imposing and serious posture. With a sly smile, the protagonist volunteers to be the first to fight him. The masked man and his followers stare at the boy in silence, and the atmosphere grows increasingly tense. In a serious voice, the man asks the brat to tell him his name right there and then. With a smirk, the young man says that they are just a bunch of bandits pretending to be knights. The commander provokes him to not be afraid, and the boy replies that he would never run away from a fight. With a furious look, he tells the Krujik clan to listen to him and prepares to introduce himself. He introduces himself as Sheik Proud and tells him to choose between dying or telling everything about the sword. With a sideways glance, the masked man simply says he understands and stares at him in silence. Suddenly, the man turns around and starts walking away, and the boy is surprised by the scene. Irritated, the boy shouts that he never said he could run away and orders him to come back now. The commander calls him by name and tells him to forget those who turn their backs on him on the battlefield. With a sly smile, she tells him to look and that the others are more than ready to fight. The enemy soldiers draw their weapons and prepare for combat with the boy's group. Two masked men release an electric aura and prepare to attack with their swords. With a wicked laugh, one of the men stares at the group and seems eager for battle. The commander's troops advance towards the enemy, and the battle finally begins in earnest. With a wry smile, the boy says it wasn't bad at all and seems to be enjoying the fight. The captain asks the young woman to step aside because the battle will be too dangerous for her there. The commander says it seems everyone is ready to fight to the end of that battle. With a cry, she declares that the weak will sink in the snow and orders her men to give it their all. With a war cry, the soldiers unleash their auras and charge headlong against the enemy. The commander also releases a red aura and prepares to fight with her spear in hand. The group advances and the enemies prepare for the counterattack with their weapons drawn. The enemy leader gives a wry smile and seems confident of his victory in the battle. With a wry smile, the protagonist says that they live up to the name of the middle division. With a furious cry, the commander advances and orders her men to attack with full force. She leaps and prepares for a powerful attack with her spear, and a red aura surrounds her. The battle begins and the two sides clash in a fierce combat full of action and blows. The soldiers fight bravely, and the snow fills with shouts and the sound of clashing swords. The commander and the captain fight together and take down several enemies with their powerful blows. The enemy archers prepare their arrows and fire at the commander with speed. With a laugh, the woman prepares for the counterattack, and a red aura surrounds her. She launches a powerful attack that destroys arrows and hits multiple enemies at once. With a furious look, she says she will not yield to such a weak attack and calls them barbarians. The enemies are frightened by her strength and wonder what that guy is doing so fast. The commander realizes that the young man's mana control is even more precise than his brother's. The captain laughs and says that's to be expected of the spear princess of the battlefield. The other soldiers also cheer and shout the captain's name with admiration and respect. With a wicked smile, the commander swells with pride and asks them to praise her more. The protagonist stares at the scene with a drop of sweat on his forehead and wonders what's wrong with her. With a powerful kick, the commander defeats yet another enemy and throws him forcefully to the ground. She then faces the boy and asks why he is standing still and orders him to help in the fight. With a sly smile, she threatens him and asks if she should poke his own backside. With a smile and an aura of fire, the boy says that it's frightening and that he passes on the offer. But he kneels on the ground, and an aura of fire and lightning begins to emanate from his body. To the commander's surprise, she realizes that he too can mold his mana in complex ways. With a shout, the boy unleashes a wave of golden energy that spreads across the battlefield. The energy explosion hits multiple enemies at once and throws them away with force. With a shout, the protagonist releases more energy, and several enemies are hit at the same time. To the commander's surprise, she realizes that he hit the target perfectly despite the distance. With a smirk, the boy says it was a clever trick and that he'll borrow it. The captain is surprised and says that the brat blatantly copied the commander's technique. With a furious look, the commander stares at the boy and is surprised that he copied her technique. Suddenly more enemies appear, and one of the soldiers warns that there are about 30 of them coming. The protagonist faces the approaching enemy cavalry and becomes alert to the situation. He then tells Perrier that they need to retreat because they are outnumbered. With a sly smile, she asks if the newcomer is losing his nerve and says that no one has lost their nerve. Irritated, the boy shouts that it's not about that and that his goal is to get the great sword. He says he has no time to lose and that fighting reinforcements will cause unnecessary casualties. The commander stares at him and asks if he is deliberately holding back his mana in battle. Surprised, the boy turns around and stammers, not knowing what to say to the woman standing there now. She explains that his technique requires extremely fine and precise mana control to work. In this, she says that not even her men can copy her and that he is good at handling mana. With a suspicious look, she asks if his mana reserve is too small for his instincts. The boy grumbles and says she can find out later because the enemies are almost catching up to them. With a sideways glance, the woman agrees and says she will question him about the matter later. She then turns around and tells him to be quiet and watch because she'll clean up the rest herself. Surprised, the boy asks what she is doing and stares at her with a worried look. With a scream, the commander releases a red aura, and a powerful energy completely envelops her. The protagonist notices that she is raising her mana to level 5 and wonders if she will use it. With a shocked look, he stares at the woman, who is brimming with energy, and stammers, not knowing what to say. The captain holds the young woman and says they need to retreat or they will die from her attack. The commander stomps hard on the ground and a shockwave ripples through the snow with force. With a smile, she says it's a glorious sight and prepares for the final attack in the fight. She says that eliminating those small fish is as simple as crushing everything in the area at once. A large spear of energy forms in her hands, and she says that this is how the strong fight. The enemies are startled by the size of the attack and wonder what that technique is. With her tongue sticking out in a wicked grin, the commander shouts for the insects to die. From afar, the protagonist grumbles that she doesn't know the meaning of the word subtle at all. He then notices something strange on the ground and wonders what on earth it is that he is seeing. With a shout, he warns her that the ground beneath them is made of ice and that it will give way under the attack. She then uses her lightning spear hammer technique and strikes the ground with all her might. An explosion of energy strikes all enemies and throws them away with a cry of pain. With a smile, she tells the weak to sleep under the snow and that this is the power of the House of Proud. Suddenly, the icy ground cracks and she loses her balance and wonders what that was. Irritated, the boy shouts that she is an idiot and that the icy ground wouldn't withstand the attack. Surprised, the commander stares at the ground and realizes the mistake she made in her powerful attack. The icy ground breaks apart and a huge fissure opens up, swallowing everyone nearby. The boy shouts that she has torn apart her own land and stares at her with a look of pure despair. Through clenched teeth, he shouts no and that the crevice is too deep for them. The young woman and the captain desperately shout the names of the two who fall into the ice crevasse. The protagonist leaps towards the commander and tries to reach her as they fall into the abyss. The two fall at high speed, and the darkness of the abyss completely envelops them there. On the surface, the survivors are horrified by the scene and wonder what happened to the place. The captain stares into the abyss and says that at that depth they would not survive the fall. The young woman stares into the hole and calls out to her master in a voice filled with despair and fear. As they fall, the boy calls her an idiot and says that anyone with a brain would know what would happen. The commander defends herself and says that this is what happens when he easily copies her technique. Irritated, she taunts him and asks if he's lost his mind over a brat like him. With wide eyes, the boy braces himself for the impact of falling to the bottom of the abyss. He then tells her to look and that they have finally reached the bottom of the ice fissure. The young man notices a bright light approaching and wonders what it is that he is seeing. She tells him to prepare for landing unless he wants to be crushed to death in the ice. With a wry smile, he says he would never make such a big mistake and braces himself for the impact. The commander and the boy release their auras and prepare to cushion their fall to the ground. With a shout, the two unleash a wave of energy and prepare for impact with the ground. The young man unleashes a burst of golden energy and illuminates the bottom of the abyss with his aura. He uses his sword to balance himself and lands safely on the icy floor of the abyss. The commander also uses her energy to land safely, and a red aura surrounds her. A great explosion of light and energy occurs when the two finally touch the ground. The commander says that they managed to land and that it was quite a fall for them. With an irritated look, the boy calls her a maniac with a brain of muscle for her recklessness. He says he's beginning to understand her personality and that for Helios's sister, she's quite rude. She says that now they need to figure out how to get back and that climbing is not an option for them. She suggests that they choose a direction and walk to find an exit or a path. With a wry smile, she says that they will separate and that each will go their own way. The boy agrees, but warns her not to use her mana recklessly in that place again. With a mischievous smile, she says that if she finds anything, she'll slap his ass so he can hear it. With a strange smile, the boy simply nods, and the two part ways to explore the area. The boy walks down an icy corridor and follows a small stream of sparkling water. With a serious look, he wonders what the hell that place is and continues his walk. He then tests the wall with his sword and realizes that it is harder than it appears to be. The young man says it looks like obsidian, but is even harder than volcanic rock. He thinks his blade won't cut unless it's covered in mana and stares at the stream. He then remembers that this is the clan's target and the treasure of the Serpent River. Suddenly, a blade of energy appears, and the boy turns to defend himself from the surprise attack. With a wry smile, he says it wasn't bad at all and faces the enemy who appeared. A masked man appears, and the boy realizes he didn't sense him until the very last second. The masked man stares at him and asks who he is, for he's so brave for a boy. The young man recognizes him as the man from before and prepares for battle with his sword. With a sly smile, he introduces himself as Sheik Proud and asks him to tell him what he knows. The masked man stares at him with his red eyes and seems to recognize his name from somewhere. With a swift movement, the man advances and attacks the boy with his energy blade. The protagonist faces the attack seriously and prepares to counterattack with his sword. The masked man calls him proud and says it is the hated lineage that has tarnished their honor. With a smirk, the boy teases him for running away and asks what honor he's talking about. With a hateful look, the masked man says he doesn't like him and stares at him with contempt. With his eyes gleaming red, the young man stares back at him with an angry expression. The masked man questions him and asks why he came after the great sword as well. Surprised, the boy asks what he means and stares at him with a confused expression. The masked man tells him not to play dumb and that their revenge will not be stopped. With a shout, he vows to seize the great sword and slay Gilgren to cleanse his clan. The boy asks if he plans to fight him right there and then, and stares at him with a serious look. He thinks the way he spoke makes it seem like he really believes he can kill Gilgren. With a sideways glance, he remembers his father and thinks that the blade might be connected to his secret. He thought he only needed a strong weapon, but now things have changed for him. The two face each other with determination and swear that they will not let the other take the sword. With a shout, the two release their auras and prepare for battle over the great sword. They advance toward each other, their blades clashing in a duel of auras and energy. The boy uses his sword to defend himself, and a large explosion of energy occurs on the ground. The masked man launches an ice attack, and the protagonist prepares to counterattack. With a leap, the young man unleashes an energy attack and charges toward his enemy in the air. Their swords clash and a great shockwave spreads across the battlefield. The two face each other with furious glances, and the battle continues with great intensity and power. The auras of the two clash, and the energy of the battle illuminates the bottom of the icy abyss. The boy is thrown backward by the force of the blow, but manages to regain his balance in the air with a jump. In his thoughts, he says that this guy is much stronger than the other members of the clan. The masked man stares at him in silence and seems to be analyzing the young man's every move. He wonders who the boy is and how he has those eyes and that sword in his hands. With a determined look, the boy says he doesn't know who he is, but that he'll find out through fighting. Suddenly, the icy ground begins to tremble, and a large fissure opens between the two. Surprised, the boy wonders if it's another earthquake, and if Perrier is up to his old tricks again. A white, three-headed serpent emerges from the icy ground and glares at the two with fury. The masked man gets scared and says it's an ancient magical beast that was hidden there. The protagonist faces the enemy, believing him to know more than he's letting on, and prepares to fight. He then catches the attention of the masked man, and it seems he is going to make him an offer. He suggests that they end the fight after they bring down the beast, because it will destroy everything. The three-headed serpent roars and stares at the two with its bright blue eyes. The masked man faces the beast and appears to be considering the protagonist's proposal. With a sigh, he finally agrees to the plan and prepares to fight the beast. But he warns him that as soon as the beast falls, he will be the next to be defeated in the battle. With a wry smile, the boy simply agrees with the threat and stares seriously at the beast. With a wry smile, the young man says that as far as he's concerned, everything is fine, and the two advance against the beast. Determined to fight, Seek and the masked warrior run side by side in the frozen cave. Straight from the depths of the earth, the colossal three-headed serpent lets out a terrifying roar. Amidst the cold fog, the pair advance while the monster's immense necks cover the ceiling. With quick and precise blows, both attempt to cut off the creature's heads in a fierce combat. Irritated by his opponent's resistance, the masked man grumbles that the creature is tough to beat and asks if he is the guardian of the place. Confused by the grumbling beside him, Seek shouts to find out if his battle partner said something. Without wasting any time, the mysterious warrior orders his mana to be focused on the back of the beast's neck to see the secret. By focusing his energy on the eyes, Seek notices bright purple markings controlling the beast's body. Impressed by the discovery, the young man notices that these are mana spells used to tame monsters. With a confident smile, Seek decides he's going to find out who's in charge and take the legendary sword for himself. Furious at the audacity, the masked man warns that no one but him will touch the weapon. At that moment, silence fills the cave for a brief second before chaos begins again. Determined to be the sole owner of the sword, the warrior dodges as the beast unleashes a freezing blast. By planting his foot firmly on the slippery ground, Seek balances himself to avoid the deadly attack. Forced to retreat hastily, the young man admits to himself that the mysterious adversary possesses considerable strength. Certain that his archenemy's eyes cannot reach the bottom of the abyss, Seek makes a risky decision. Upon invoking its true power, dark flames begin to engulf the metal blade. Engulfed in a fiery rage of fire and electricity, the protagonist prepares to unleash his secret technique. With a mocking smile, the boy celebrates the fact that he can use imperial fencing without being discovered. In command of the fourth form of his fighting style, Seek prepares the strike called Serpent's Fang. With a furious cry, the dark claws lunge forward and bite the neck of the gigantic ice beast. Shocked by the immense power unleashed there, the masked ally watches the destruction without being able to move. Incredulous at what he sees, the masked man wonders how an heir to the proud family masters the forbidden technique. In a violent leap from above, Seek delivers a devastating flaming slash straight to the top of the monster's heads. Landing swiftly through the smoke, the young man gasps for breath after expending a tremendous amount of energy. Suddenly, the creature ignores the pain and charges furiously through the smoke to counterattack. With icy blue eyes, the three heads surround Seek, ready to devour him. Through clenched teeth, the boy complains about the extreme hardness of the beast's scales. Frustrated with the limitations of his childlike body, Seek realizes he doesn't have enough mana to focus all his strength on the blade. To ensure his swift survival, the warrior decides to concentrate all his energy solely on the tip of his sword. In a quick dodge of a freezing ray, the boy leaps aside before being struck. In pain from the physical exertion, Seek tries to position himself in the air to avoid falling pathetically. Furious, the giant monster chases the young man, destroying the surrounding glaciers with swift movements. By touching the ground with precision, the protagonist regains his balance but finds himself surrounded again. Gasping from extreme exhaustion, Seek takes a deep breath and notices his masked ally right behind him. Irritated by his partner's behavior, the boy accuses him of trying to hit him along with the monster. Cold and without remorse, the masked man replies that Seek is to blame for letting his guard down in combat. Raising his gleaming sword, the warrior reminds Seek's family that they are his mortal enemies. Without showing fear, the protagonist calls him a coward and challenges him to try and kill him if he is able. Faced with imminent danger, the pair interrupt their fight and turn their attention to the colossal three-headed beast. Surprised when he looked to the side, Seek noticed an intense blue aura covering the masked man's sword. Focused on the other's technique, the young man realizes that the warrior compresses his mana perfectly into the exact shape of the blade. Aware of the extreme difficulty, the boy mentally admits that such a feat requires a surreal level of mana control, worthy of a warrior. Even in the face of the monster's ferocious attack, the mysterious ally manages to block it with ease. With his feet firmly planted on the ice, the masked man holds the giant beast's jaws shut with only the strength of his blade. Relentless in its attempt to crush him, the beast uses all its weight, but the warrior remains firm, holding onto the immense fangs. With his teeth clenched beneath his mask, the mysterious fighter focuses his mana to withstand the colossal pressure. Enraged by the resistance, the three-headed beast roars loudly in an attempt to break through his defenses. Sensing the opening created, Seek leaps with his flaming sword straight for the monster's unprotected neck. With a flaming sideways blow, the young man strikes the beast's flesh and drives it away from his ally. Affected by the strong impact, Seek groans in pain and admits that the beast's carcass is much tougher than it seemed. Intrigued by the brilliant technique, the protagonist demands that the masked figure reveal the secret to compressing mana in such a way. Proud and grumpy, the warrior replies with disdain and asks if the young man thinks he owes him any favors. With a war cry, the masked man throws the creature's head back in a swift counterattack. With full force, an immense blue shockwave tears through the air and carves a path between the ice walls of the cave. With a cold, sidelong glance, the ally states firmly that he doesn't need help to defeat a weak monster. Impatient with his pride, Seek denies that he was helping and insists that he only wants to learn the mana technique. Impressed by such precision, the boy sincerely praises the masked man's mana control skills. Not knowing how to react to the compliment, the mysterious fighter turns his face away and mutters that Seek is difficult to understand. Pondering the young man's attitude, the masked man mentally admits that, despite his insolence, Seek is acting correctly when it comes to combat. With his eyes fixed on his mysterious ally, Seek realizes that the way he handles that sword is very similar to something familiar from his past. In the boy's mind, the imposing figure of his past life, as the legendary warrior Chrono Gaius, instantly resurfaces. Beneath his exotic mask, the Krujic clan fighter sweats profusely and refuses to believe the impossible hypothesis that has arisen in his mind. With a serious tone, the mysterious warrior stares closely at the boy and begins to talk about his sword. Without mincing words, the masked figure explains that simply swinging large amounts of mana around is effective against weak opponents, but useless against solid defenses. Patiently, he continues the lesson and states that there are several different ways to compress and release a warrior's vital energy. Facing the young man, the warrior states that each combatant develops their own personal style on the battlefield. Pondering the words, Seek accepts the lesson and murmurs to himself that he too possesses his own special technique. Although he feels repulsed at sharing secrets with someone from the proud family, the warrior says that this settles the debt he owed him. With a wry smile on his lips, Seek retorts that he owes nothing and doubts his ally's ability to perform an accurate compression. In a tone of pure mockery, the masked man states that, with such clumsy hands, the boy should find another way to fight. Surprisingly, Seek agrees to the provocation and admits that his temporary battle partner may have a point. With a determined look, the boy decides to put his own secret technique to the test at that very moment. On the other side of the ice rink, the masked man accepts the silent challenge and orders the young man to show his true strength. Instantly, currents of electricity and flames begin to menacingly envelop the hilt of Seek's sword. Engulfed in a dark and destructive fury, the boy unleashes an absurd amount of energy that illuminates the entire cave. Without any hesitation, Seek decides that he doesn't need perfection and that he will unleash all his power without restrictions. Faced with the colossal threat of the three-headed serpent, the boy focuses his sole objective on tearing everything in his path to shreds. With absolute focus on his mana, spirals of white light and heat begin to dance around the warrior's body. Quickly, energy loops around his sword mold into the terrifying shape of several snakes of pure light. Prepared for the decisive blow, the hero activates the fourth blade of the traditional Kulshia sword, named Serpent's Fang. Completely paralyzed by shock, the masked man observes the scene in silence and describes the young man as a true monster. In an incredibly swift movement, the power strip cuts through the frigid air and surges toward the immense beast. In an impressive leap over the creature's three necks, Seek unleashes his devastating technique with utter fury. With a crushing impact, Seek's flaming sword collides with the top of the gigantic monster's head. Incredulous, the warrior from the Krujic clan realizes that the attack pierced the creature's nearly indestructible scale armor. Positioned firmly atop the beast's head, the young man plunges his sword even deeper to ensure the final blow. With clenched teeth and a relentless gaze, Seek shouts that he is not yet finished punishing the creature. In a few seconds, dozens of bright cracks cover the entire length of the giant snake's neck. With extreme violence, a massive explosion of energy and light destroys the beast's body structure from the inside out. Faced with the monster's colossal fall, the masked figure concludes in shock that the boy infiltrated the mana through the cracks in the scales to destroy it from within. With utmost respect, the fighter notes the lethal combination of that brutal force and surgical control of energy. As the beast's lifeless body collapses to the ground, the warrior's mind struggles to process the boy's true identity. Landing lightly on the frozen ground, the hero begins to dissipate the flames from his blade after the battle ends. With an ironic smile, Seek thanks his partner and sincerely praises the compression technique he learned. Quite impressed, the masked man praises the boy's ability to listen to advice from the enemy even with so much power. By far, the warrior highlights the young man's incredible mental flexibility in instantly adapting to a disadvantage. With his eyes fixed on the boy, the masked man asserts that this adaptability is the hallmark of a true combat giant. Without further hesitation, the warrior asks the crucial question and wonders if Seek is in fact the sword saint Chrono Gaius. Completely shocked by the unexpected question, the boy recoils and wonders how his opponent discovered his biggest secret. Beneath the dark ceiling of the cave, the warrior cites the ancient legend that the gods bring vengeful souls from the underworld after 1,000 seasons. With conviction, the ally states that the boy's sword techniques and mana control seem not only immature, but completely bizarre. In the clan fighter's view, it seems evident that the legendary hero killed in the revolution is struggling to escape that child's body. With cold sweat on his brow, Seek grinds his teeth silently to maintain his composure in the face of the grave revelation. In a tone of direct accusation, the warrior asks once again how he managed to reincarnate in that young body if he is truly the hero. In an effort to disguise his panic, Seek feigns complete ignorance and accuses the masked man of spouting nonsensical drivel. Suddenly, a devastating headache hits the boy with extreme force, tearing a groan of pure agony from him. Fallen to his knees on the hard ice, Seek lets his sword fall to the ground while his ally watches the situation in confusion. With his hands pressed against the cold ground, the young man mentally curses the fact that his mana has depleted so quickly. On the verge of losing consciousness completely, the hero desperately fights to avoid fainting before solving the mystery. Behind his frightening mask, the ally wonders if that boy truly has any connection to the deceased Chrono. With a suspicious look, the warrior asks if Seek's silence is merely an attempt to evade his direct questions. Curious about the boy's deplorable state, the masked man wonders if this extreme weakness is the price paid for the process of reincarnation. Completely weakened on the ground, Seek admits to himself that this warrior possesses an extremely sharp and dangerous intellect. With a fist clenched in frustration, the protagonist decides that no one can discover his true identity under any circumstances. Suddenly, a terrifying noise echoes from the top of the frozen cave, immediately drawing the attention of Seek and his ally. Under the pressure of the falling three-headed beast, the surrounding ice walls begin to crack severely. With a deafening roar, the immense frozen barrier collapses completely, blocking the two combatants' escape. Amidst the dense cloud of dust and frozen debris, the masked figure tensely wonders if another magical beast is about to emerge from there. Completely drained of energy and exhausted from the previous battle, Seek grits his teeth at the immense danger that a new monster might appear now. Facing the mysterious warrior before him, our protagonist realizes that the sword fighting style is identical to something from his past. With memories of his previous life, our boy recalls the imposing figure of the legendary hero Chrono Gaius. Behind the horned mask, the warrior tries to fight back a cold sweat in the face of a suspicion that seems impossible. Taking a serious look at our little protagonist, the masked figure decides to speak openly about the fencing style he uses. To put it bluntly, the ally explains that simply swinging large amounts of energy around is not effective against opponents with solid defenses. With the technical explanation underway, the warrior says that magical energy can be molded into very distinct shapes. Focused on our protagonist, the masked figure emphasizes that each warrior must find their own way of fighting. Thoughtfully pondering his battle partner's words, our boy concludes that he also needs to define his fighting style. Even feeling disgusted at helping a proud heir, the fighter claims that the lesson learned now settles any outstanding debt. With a confident smile on his face, our little protagonist retorts that he never owed anything, provoking the masked man's pride. In the middle of the cold cave, the ally mocks the boy's clumsy energy and tells him to find another way to fight. To the clan warrior's surprise, our boy simply agrees that the criticism might make perfect sense. With glowing red eyes, our protagonist decides to test the true potential of his energy technique right now. Willing to accept the silent challenge, the masked warrior steps aside and asks to see a glimpse of true power. While gripping the sword's hilt firmly, our little protagonist begins to concentrate a terrifying aura of flames and lightning. With all the fury pent up in his chest, our protagonist prepares to unleash a devastating blow on the ice arena. Determined not to hold back any longer, the boy plans to focus on his compression technique without worrying about perfection. Faced with the colossal three-headed serpent, our boy prepares to mercilessly tear the target apart. With quick and precise movements, our little prot begins to draw spirals of white light around its body. Through the perfect channeling of his magical energy, the boy creates the terrifying form of luminous serpents on the battlefield. With the activation of the famous fourth form of Kulshia swordsmanship, our protagonist initiates the powerful technique known as Serpent Fang. Completely shocked by the level of skill demonstrated, the ally describes our boy as a true monster. In an extremely agile leap across the stage, our little protagonist launches his devastating slash directly at the giant beast. In a swift fall like a dark lightning bolt over the serpent's three necks, our protagonist prepares to finish the fight. With a colossal impact from his flaming blade, the boy strikes the top of the creature's head with maximum force. From afar, the masked warrior notices with surprise that the blow managed to pierce the monster's resistant carcass. With his feet firmly planted on the beast's enormous head, our protagonist plunges the metal even deeper to secure victory. Through clenched teeth filled with rage, the boy shouts that the final attack against the ice monster is not yet over. As the cave trembles with the intensity of the blow, the boy's energy begins to spread throughout the structure. In a swift warning to the young heir, the ally warns that the legendary Sword of Shadows will test his worthiness as a warrior. Under intense mental pressure, our little protagonist begins to gasp for breath from the immense energy flow of the weapon. With a scream of pure agony, our protagonist is engulfed by a colossal column of black and red flames. Startled by the violent reaction of the sword, the masked man watches the explosion of power without being able to get closer. Deep within his troubled mind, our boy's eyes open to a flood of forgotten memories. In the midst of a dark fog, the hated figure of Gilgren appears, enveloped in purple flames of energy. Overcome with deep hatred upon seeing the villain again, our protagonist whispers the name of the wretch who destroyed his life. With the revelation of an ancient, decisive battle, the sword's memories show a knight confronting the master of necromancy. In the deadly battle against the villain, the former owner of the Shadow Blade tried everything to protect the kingdom. Cruelly defeated by the necromancer, the warrior from the past was subdued in mere seconds. With echoes of pure agony and suffering, the soul trapped in the legendary weapon cries out for immediate vengeance. Convinced that those images are tragic memories of the sword, our protagonist vows that the villain will pay for everything. With his aura of hatred spreading throughout the ice cave, our boy rises with unwavering determination. Paralyzed by fear in the face of such fury, the warrior of the Krujik clan observes the boy's destructive power. In a deafening roar of pure rage, our little protagonist makes currents of dark energy tear through the air. With the blade handle gripped so tightly that his own hand begins to bleed, the boy ignores the physical pain. In a massive seismic upheaval in the frozen cave, a colossal pillar of red and black power explodes into the sky. In a mental dialogue directly with the soul of the sword, our protagonist realizes that they both share the same hatred for the necromancer. With a cold and ruthless gaze, the boy assures that he feels exactly the same desire for revenge. With the image of the downfall of all who tried to challenge the villain in the past, our protagonist refuses to suffer the same tragic end. Determined to exterminate the wretch in the name of all the victims, the boy asks the sword to lend him its power. With a gigantic, shadowy silhouette looming behind him, our protagonist successfully channels the blade's energy. With wide eyes fixed on the top of the cave, the ally witnesses the manifestation of that divine power. Suddenly, a loud noise reveals that the giant serpent's body is moving again on the ice. Even without the severed heads, the three-headed monster slowly begins to rise again. Faced with the creature reanimated by necromancy, the warrior of the Krujik clan complains about the inopportune interruption in the combat. With teeth clenched in rage, the ally draws his weapon and orders the beast to retreat immediately. With exposed scars and an overwhelming dark aura, our little protagonist takes the front line in the fight. With an extremely cold look, the boy states that he will finish off the beast and that the new weapon is eager to slice it up. With the situation now fully clarified, the masked warrior realizes that the legendary sword has accepted the boy. Without any remaining doubt in his mind, the ally pronounces the name of the legendary hero Chronogeus. With a firm tone of refusal, our protagonist warns not to be called by that name, as he is not yet fully Chrono. In profile and focused on his true target, our boy asserts that he is solely responsible for exterminating Gilgren. Startled by the immense release of energy, the masked warrior focuses his attention on the gleaming glow of the blade. With eyes flushed with pure fury, our little protagonist prepares to channel the power of the legendary sword. In a devastating blow that cuts through the darkness, our protagonist creates a gigantic beam of red and black flames. With a violent roar throughout the cave, the energy spreads in a flash of intense red light. Launched from the depths of the frozen abyss, the pillar of energy cuts through the mountaintop and soars into the heavens. At the bottom of the immense ice hole, the pair watch silently as the ash and debris begin to settle. With a wry laugh, the ally remarks that our boy really doesn't know the meaning of holding back in a fight. Showing no signs of fatigue and shirtless, our protagonist praises the weapon's power and confesses that he feels a strong sense of nostalgia. In the blink of an eye, currents of purple and red energy begin to spread through our little protoprot's arms. Completely surprised by the bizarre phenomenon, the young man watches the sword disintegrate into particles and vanish into thin air. Focused on his own wrist, our boy notices a reddish crescent moon-shaped mark appearing on his skin. Confused by the weapon fused to his body, our protagonist listens as his ally explains that this is Moonshade's own will. According to the words of the mysterious warrior, the sword vanishes like a shadow and returns only when called upon to shine in the darkness. Thoughtful about the new information he has acquired, our boy murmurs the name of the legendary weapon to test his connection to it. With a friendly wave of farewell, the Krujik clan's ally bids our little protagonist goodbye and wishes him good luck on his journey. Irritated by his partner's sudden departure, our protagonist shouts, demanding answers to several questions he still has in mind. Without looking back, the masked man states that their shared goal is to kill Gilgren, so they will inevitably meet in the future. With the final revelation of his true identity, the warrior says his name is Shuratori and promises to meet our boy again later. In a swift disappearance amidst a thick fog of blue smoke, the masked figure leaves our protagonist completely alone in the cave. With a sly smile, our little protagonist jokes that the new ally loves to be dramatic and theatrical until the very last second. Exhausted by the enormous amount of energy consumed in the fight, our boy collapses backward onto the ice floes. With his body completely exhausted and breathless, our protagonist admits to himself that he has reached his physical limit for the day. Far away, under the dark night sky of a gloomy cemetery, the feared figure of Gilgren rests on his throne. With a cold, authoritative demeanor, our boy's archenemy observes a magical seal glowing on his hand. Through the image engraved on the mystical paper, the villain notices that the seal of the three-headed serpent has been completely broken. With eyes gleaming in a shade of pure pink fury and mystery, the necromancer displays an expression of silent rage. Back in the frozen, snow-covered lands, Commander Perrier's carriage continues its journey along the difficult road. With extreme difficulty focusing his vision, our little protagonist wakes up dazed after fainting in the ice cave. With his hand on his head as he sits in the wooden carriage, our protagonist complains of the terrible pain and physical exhaustion. With a firm and authoritative look, Commander Perrier announces that the boy has woken up and demands that he not come up with excuses. Relieved to see that her master is well, the faithful Maidbelle cries out with happiness from outside the transport vehicle. With visible concern on her young face, the servant asks if our boy remembers all the events of the previous day. After reflecting on the details of the great ice battle, our protagonist concludes that he fainted due to the complete depletion of his mana. Aware of the extreme limitations of his child's body, our little protagonist recognizes in his thoughts that he has pushed his physical limits too far. Disdainfully, the commander states that our boy exaggerated and is surprised that he played with monsters until he passed out. Justifying herself by saying she was busy looking for the exit, Perrier complains that she sent the promised signal and questions why he didn't hear it. In an account of the rescue, Belle reveals that the group heard the crash of the frozen wall collapsing and rushed to help our protagonist. Grateful for the help received at a critical moment, our boy expresses his sincere gratitude to his travel companions. With a determined look fixed on the horizon, the commander announces that they are about to reach the mysterious ruins. With a gesture towards the icy air, she alerts our little protagonist about the negative and sinister mana of Gilgren that leaks from the ancient ruins. Under a sky heavy with purple and menacing energy, the group heads towards the epicenter of danger on the snow-covered mountain. Consumed by thoughts of deep hatred, our protagonist whispers the name of his archenemy through clenched teeth filled with rage. Surprised by a sudden change in the local atmosphere, Commander Perrier reacts immediately on high alert. Straight from the blizzard with fury evident in their red eyes, a pack of giant wolves blocks the path of the group of soldiers. In total panic at the colossal size of the beasts, the coachman shouts, asking what kind of demonic creature it is. Ready to defend his servant, our boy draws his golden-plated sword and complains about the endless horde of opponents. With a firm warning of authority, the commander orders our protagonist not to waste his magical energy recklessly. In a detailed explanation of the danger ahead, she reveals that those beasts are corrupted and feed directly on pure mana. With quick, deadly leaps toward the carriage, the corrupted wolves launch a coordinated attack. Terrified by the swift approach of the sharp claws, Belle desperately cries out for help from our little protagonist. With a powerful cry to protect his servant, our protagonist orders Belle to retreat and stay behind the transport vehicle. In the face of the gigantic fangs of the first wolf that charges at full speed, our boy uses all his strength to resist. With a devastating acrobatic leap from atop her horse, the commander uses her sharp spear to cut the giant wolf in half. Overcome with fury in direct combat, our little protagonist insults the creature with negative mana while trying to cut its head off. With a spinning strike of extreme precision, our protagonist hurls one of the corrupted wolves far away into the snow. Wounded by the hero's blade, the monster howls in pain and falls heavily against the frozen ground. Suddenly, a new unpleasant surprise hits our boy, who widens his eyes amidst the smoke of battle. With slow steps through the thick fog of the ancient ruins, the colossal leader of the pack reemerges covered in sinister blue flames. With an expression of pure pain and suffering, our protagonist realizes that the wolf is indeed consuming all of his mana. In a strongly reprimanding tone, Commander Perrier reminds them that she warned about the danger of feeding the monster's mana. Aware of the conflict around her, she explains that negative mana is the opposite of positive mana and can engulf the consciousness of anyone who falters. Utterly indignant at the extreme disadvantage, our boy wonders how he will fight in that 10-year-old body without magical energy. Focused on the strange sensation running through his body, our little protagonist feels a familiar discomfort in his chest. With painful memories of the past, our protagonist concludes without a doubt that that evil energy is the same as Gilgren's. Faced with the immense threat, the boy understands that the secret behind the villain's power lies just ahead in the ruins. With a swift defensive movement, our boy uses his sword to ward off the terrifying bite of one of the wolves. Thrown backward by the force of the impact on the snow, our little protagonist lets out a low groan of extreme exhaustion. With teeth clenched in pure frustration, our protagonist admits to himself that this battle is extremely irritating to win. Incredulous at the power of the corrupted monsters, our boy refuses to accept that such creatures actually exist. Up close, the commander explains that only Gilgren possesses negative mana, which absorbs positive energy to fuel his necromancy. Beneath the purple smoke that blankets the snow-capped mountains, she reveals that the energy leaked due to the villain's ritual preparations. Irritated by the unfavorable situation, our little protagonist hears the commander ask how he intends to defeat the beasts without using mana. With a proud and confident smile on her face, the icy warrior declares that monsters of that level are nothing to her. With her gleaming metal spear charged with pure energy, Commander Perrier prepares for a devastating counterattack. With a firm cry of her special technique's name, the warrior launches herself into combat with lightning-fast speed. In a swift downward motion, the gleaming spear cuts through the giant wolf's body with extreme ease. With a great explosion of red and white light, the impact destroys the target and frightens away any remaining creatures nearby. With a final howl of pure pain and despair, the monster is completely consumed by the devastating attack. Faced with an immense barrier of ice that shatters completely with the blow, the force of the attack is demonstrated. Completely shocked by the scene of destruction, our protagonist realizes that the technique is a perfect condensation of mana, identical to Shiratori's. With an intrigued smile on his face, our boy wonders to himself how many secret techniques the commander is still hiding. With a proud posture after the decisive blow, the commander faces the remaining enemies with total superiority on the battlefield. Suddenly, everyone's attention is drawn to an overwhelming presence that emerges right in front of the group in the snow. Straight from the blizzard with heavy footsteps that shake the earth, two colossal stone creatures block the path. Utterly perplexed by the sheer magnitude of the danger, our little protagonist angrily wonders what they should do now. In absolute panic from atop the carriage, the servant bell and the coachman scream in despair upon seeing the giant monsters. With his combat spear raised once more, Perrier identifies the monsters as twin stone ogres that should be extinct. Terrified at the negative influence of Gilgren on the beasts, the coachman trembles as he recalls ancient legends about the Lord of the Snows. With overwhelming and brutal force, the stone ogre delivers a devastating blow directly against the warriors. With a cloud of snow and frozen debris everywhere, the brutal impact throws the soldiers and our protagonist far away. Forced to fall from the disintegrating carriage, Belle lets out a desperate scream of terror as she hits the ground. Desperate to see his faithful servant in mortal danger, our boy cries out Belle's name with pure anguish in his eyes. In a swift advance to save the carriage, the commander orders our little protagonist to deal with the other approaching stone ogre. Surprised to look back, our protagonist realizes that the gigantic stone ogre is already positioned directly above him, ready to crush him. Forced to dodge a crushing punch at the last second, the young man rolls through the snow to avoid being crushed by the colossal fist. With his teeth clenched in rage at his opponent's audacity, our boy calls the monster a reckless bastard in his thoughts. Faced with the giant foot about to stomp on him, our little protagonist knows that any normal mana attack will be absorbed by the creature. In a swift dodge to avoid the destructive trampling, the boy calculates that using excessive mana will cause him to faint from exhaustion again. Standing quickly amidst the relentless blizzard, our protagonist decides there's no time to hesitate or feel fear now. With a cold gaze focused on absolute victory, our boy vows in his thoughts that he will not stop for his friends and for Hannah. With his fist clenched and positioned close to the ground, the mystical mark on his arm begins to glow intensely with blue rays. Enveloped by black flames and bluish electricity that tears through the frigid air, our little protagonist invokes the absolute power of Moonshade. With a firm tone of refusal, our protagonist warns not to be called by that name, as he is not yet fully chrono. In profile and focused on his true target, our boy claims that he is the only one who will eliminate Gilgren. Startled by the immense release of energy, the masked warrior focuses his attention on the gleaming glow of the blade. With eyes reddened with pure fury, our little protagonist prepares to channel the power of the legendary sword. With a devastating blow that cuts through the darkness, the young man creates a gigantic beam of red and black flames. With a violent roar throughout the cave, the energy spreads in a flash of intense red light. Launched from the depths of the frozen abyss, the pillar of energy cuts through the mountaintop and soars into the heavens. Inside the ice crevasse, the pair watch silently as the ash and debris begin to settle. With a wry laugh, the ally remarks that our boy really doesn't know the meaning of holding back in a fight. Showing no signs of fatigue and shirtless, our protagonist praises the weapon's power and confesses that he feels a strong sense of nostalgia. Quickly, in the blink of an eye, currents of purple and red energy begin to spread through our little protoprot's arms. Completely surprised by the bizarre phenomenon, the young man watches the sword disintegrate into particles and vanish into thin air. Focused on his own wrist, our boy notices a reddish crescent moon-shaped mark appearing on his skin. Confused by the weapon fused to his body, our protagonist listens as his ally explains that this is Moonshade's own will. According to the words of the mysterious warrior, the sword vanishes like a shadow and returns only when called upon to shine in the darkness. Thoughtful about the new information he has acquired, our boy murmurs the name of the legendary weapon to test his connection to it. With a friendly wave of farewell, the Krujik clan's ally bids our little protagonist goodbye and wishes him good luck on his journey. Irritated by his partner's sudden departure, our protagonist shouts, demanding answers to several questions he still has in mind. Without looking back, the masked man states that their shared goal is to kill Gilgren, so they will inevitably meet in the future. With the revelation of his true identity, the warrior says his name is Shuratori and promises to meet our boy again later. Quickly disappearing into a thick cloud of blue smoke, the masked figure leaves our protagonist completely alone in the cave. With a sly smile, our little protagonist jokes that the new ally loves to be dramatic and theatrical until the very last second. Exhausted by the enormous amount of energy consumed in the fight, our boy collapses backward onto the ice floes. With his body completely exhausted and breathless, our protagonist admits to himself that he has reached his physical limit for the day. Far away, under the dark night sky of a gloomy cemetery, the feared figure of Gilgren rests on his throne. With a cold, authoritative demeanor, our boy's archenemy observes a magical seal glowing on his hand. Through the image engraved on the mystical paper, the villain notices that the seal of the three-headed serpent has been completely broken. With eyes gleaming a shade of pure pink fury and mystery, the necromancer displays an expression of silent rage. Back in the frozen, snow-covered lands, Commander Perrier's carriage continues its journey along the difficult road. With extreme difficulty focusing his vision, our little protagonist wakes up dazed after fainting in the ice cave. With his hand on his head as he sits in the wooden carriage, our protagonist complains of the terrible pain and physical exhaustion. With a firm, sidelong glance, Commander Perrier announces that the young man has woken up and demands that he not come up with excuses. Relieved to see that her master is well, the faithful Maidbelle cries out with happiness from outside the transport vehicle. With visible concern on her young face, the servant asks if our boy remembers all the events of the previous day. After reflecting on the details of the great ice battle, our protagonist concludes that he fainted due to the complete depletion of his mana. Aware of the extreme limitations of his child's body, our little protagonist recognizes in his thoughts that he has pushed his physical limits too far. Disdainfully, the commander states that our boy exaggerated and is surprised that he played with monsters until he passed out. Justifying herself by saying she was busy looking for the exit, Perrier complains that she sent the promised signal and questions why he didn't hear it. During the rescue story, Belle reveals that the group heard the crash of the frozen wall collapsing and rushed to help our protagonist. Grateful for the help received at a critical moment, our boy expresses his sincere gratitude to his travel companions. With a determined look fixed on the horizon, the commander announces that they are about to reach the ruins of Historia. With a gesture towards the icy air, she alerts our little protagonist about the negative and sinister mana of Gilgren that leaks from the ancient ruins. Under a sky heavy with purple and menacing energy, the group heads towards the epicenter of danger on the snow-covered mountain. Consumed by thoughts of deep hatred, our protagonist murmurs the name of his archenemy through clenched teeth filled with rage. Surprised by a sudden change in the local atmosphere, Commander Perrier reacts immediately on high alert. Straight from the blizzard with fury evident in their red eyes, a pack of giant wolves blocks the path of the group of soldiers. In total panic at the colossal size of the beasts, the coachman shouts, asking what kind of demonic creature it is. Ready to defend his servant, our boy draws his golden-plated sword and complains about the endless horde of opponents. With a firm warning of authority, the commander orders our protagonist not to waste his magical energy recklessly. In a detailed explanation of the danger ahead, she reveals that those beasts are corrupted and feed directly on pure mana. With quick, deadly leaps toward the carriage, the corrupted wolves launch a coordinated attack. Terrified by the rapidly approaching sharp claws, Belle desperately cries out for help from our little protagonist. Shouting imposingly to protect his servant, our protagonist orders Belle to retreat and stay behind the transport vehicle. To block the gigantic fangs of the first wolf that charges at full speed, our boy uses all his strength to resist. With a devastating acrobatic leap from atop her horse, the commander uses her sharp spear to cut the giant wolf in half. Consumed by fury in direct combat, our little protagonist insults the creature with negative mana while trying to cut its head off. With a spinning strike of extreme precision, our protagonist hurls one of the corrupted wolves far away into the snow. Wounded by the hero's blade, the monster howls in pain and falls heavily against the frozen ground. Suddenly, a new unpleasant surprise hits our boy, whose eyes widen amidst the smoke of battle. With slow steps through the thick fog of the ancient ruins, the colossal leader of the pack reemerges covered in sinister blue flames. Standing beside the kneeling Commander Perrier, our protagonist silently faces the dreaded Lord Gilgren in the hall. In an authoritative tone, the necromancer comments on the elimination of the magical beasts and the escape of the Krujic clan invaders. Under the intense pressure of the villain's presence, our boy tries to control his breathing and hide his cold sweat. Turning directly to our protagonist, the Lord says he heard about his participation in the mission and receives a timid confirmation. With few words and an enigmatic look, the head of the family merely murmurs that he understands the situation. To the general surprise of everyone present, the necromancer praises our boy's performance and states that strength is the family motto. Paralyzed by the shock of hearing such a statement, the servant Belle finds it hard to believe that the Lord actually congratulated our protagonist. Inside the stone hall, the villain lights a mystical purple flame and announces the preparations for the receptacle ritual. Under the sinister glow of the purple fire, our little protagonist and the commander stare at the scene in profound astonishment. Seized by immediate panic, the icy warrior screams in terror upon realizing what is before her eyes. Hanging upside down by ropes from the ceiling, several lifeless human bodies emerge from the darkness. Faced with a nightmarish scene, the pair try to understand the identity of those people sacrificed in such a cruel way. Terrified by the macabre sight of the stone hall, Belle lets out a scream of terror and recoils, unable to look away. With a smile of pure sadism on his face, the necromancer coldly reveals that all those bodies are the siblings of our protagonist. Filled with overwhelming rage and clenched teeth, our boy wonders to himself what kind of monster would do this to his own children. Completely paralyzed and with her face covered in sweat from terror, Perrier remains in absolute silence, not knowing how to react. Among the lifeless victims hanging from the ceiling, Helios's bloodied body appears mutilated with one of his arms cut off.